In order, we're going to go to item number 17, public comment in Elko.
Yes, we have public comment in Elko.
No. Take roll on the first day. Public comment in Las Vegas.
We do
He
have
said no.
public comment in Elko.
Oh, there is. Okay, I'm sorry. If you could please state your name and spell it for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Cami Gerber, CAMIGERBER.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Like I said, my name is Cami Gerber. Good morning, Board of Regents. I'm an administrative assistant here at Great Basin College, and I was planning to come talk to you this morning to invite you to recognize NSHE classified staff within the NSHE Procedure and Policies Manual as stakeholders in the executive evaluation process. And on behalf of the GBC classified staff and council, I thank you for making the decision yesterday to do this. I further encourage you to consult classified staff councils at each of the NSHE institutions when writing policy, as at GBC alone, we make up 29% of our full-time employees. We are invested in the success of our college, and we are essential to that success. We're pleased that you've made this decision. We are starting a grassroots movement at our college to build morale, and this is the first step, I think, to beginning that movement. And I invite you to continue this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Go to public comment in Las Vegas.
Good morning, Regents and NSHE institutions. My name is Joanna DiBella, D-I-B-E-L-L-A. I'm an executive assistant in the Office of the Executive Vice President and Provost here at UNLV. As the chair of the Classified Staff Council at UNLV for fiscal year 2020, I wanted to introduce myself to you all and bring some information to your attention. Classified employees make up 28% of the total full-time employee population at UNLV. We are essential to UNLV's function, and we are invested in the success of our institution and the Nevada system of higher education. As a collective of employees at UNLV, we are the unseen population. We are the custodial workers, groundskeepers, delivery services, maintenance, and administrative assistants, and all-encompassing support staff of the state of Nevada and this institution. Without us, our work, and our dedication, many daily operations would suffer. Currently, classified staff are not specifically named or recognized within the NSHE Procedures and Guidelines Manual, Chapter 2, Section 2, as stakeholders in the executive evaluation process, nor are classified staff provided with the opportunity to participate in this process in an anonymous evaluation format. The UNLV Classified Staff Council, in conjunction with Great Basin College Classified Council, requests from the Board of Regents that classified staff across NSHE be included and recognized in the NSHE Procedures and Guidelines Manual as NSHE stakeholders, and that classified councils at each of the NSHE institutions be consulted in the rewriting of the Procedures and Guidelines Manual to reflect our stakeholder status. In closing, at UNLV, our council is currently comprised of dedicated volunteers, and we are working to better communicate with our constituents, actively address their concerns, and be more involved in the UNLV community and NSHE. We ask that you please remember to think about and include us as you make decisions at NSHE. We appreciate and thank you for everything you do in higher education in Nevada. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other public comment in Las Vegas, we'll go to public comment in Reno.
And Cesтрyon. I am a resident of Washoe County and a graduate of the University of Nevada, Reno. I am here today to make a request regarding your Gateway project, item 23 on your agenda. I am asking for a postponement until all the historic houses on that gateway can be relocated. My reason? Tradition. My personal journey began 52 years ago when I walked past those wonderful homes to register for classes as a freshman. It was a magical and inspiring walk, the one place in town where the future connected with the past. I have made that walk many times over the years. It has kept me connected to this university. I am realistic and know traditions die. Today, with sad heart, I will bid farewell to my tradition on my last walk down Center Street. My concern is that I will now be disconnected from this institution, and you, the governing body, will not care. Be aware, every time you make a move that members of the community do not want, a certain portion of that community will disconnect. Oh, it won't hurt the university, because the wealthy and influential will always be on your side. But people like me, the unimportant, the unknown, will always be here. We will be watching. We are the historians, the preservationists, the researchers, the educators. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, Chair Page, Chancellor O'Reilly, Regents and Presidents. My name is Kent Irvin, E-R-V-I-N, representing the Nevada Faculty Alliance. The NFA works to empower faculty to be fully engaged in our mission of helping students succeed. I would like to thank the Chancellor for NSHE's commitment for the 3% COLAs despite the state's underfunding. Even with the COLA in the first year, salaries will fall behind inflation by the end of the biennium, and faculty are the only group of Nevada public employees without in-rank merit steps. The state must be held accountable for fixing the COLA shortfall and its underfunded mandate. It is not acceptable to cover the $6.4 million shortfall by cutting student programs or asking students to pay more. It was a legislative session of disappointments for NSHE and for faculty. We all need to work together to figure out how to improve the standing of higher education with our elected officials. As far as budgets, though, the fundamental problems are that K-12 education is underfunded and the state's tax system is structurally unable to keep up with economic and population growth. We must advocate for increasing the size and stability of the revenue pie instead of trying to slice it differently. Finally, we are now faced with the reality that the legislature and governor have not stepped up to help fix our salary compression problems, even through SB 214, which only asks for a future mechanism to be put in place. There has been discussion of an NSHE internal task force or working groups to determine how to move forward on establishing a sustainable faculty compensation system as was envisioned in SB 214. We ask you to move forward with the task force, and we pledge NFA support and constructive involvement in that process so that it works together with our collective bargaining units at CSN, TMCC, and WNCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent, and thanks for all your efforts at the legislature. Seeing no other public comment, we are going to close
Mr.
public.
Chair?
Yes.
Uh,
Guys.
Just a point of personal privilege. When Professor Unger was talking to us yesterday morning in our meeting, he referenced how higher education was a very large ship and it takes a long time for things to steer. And I think over the last 2 years under your chairmanship, we have turned the boat a bit and we've made some advances. So on behalf of all of the other regions, I would like to present you with a gift for your last meeting as chair.
We're going to go to item number 30.
And close public comment first.
Public comment is closed. How cool is that? Gavel? That's pretty cool.
Was it gold? It's not open. No one opened it.
I'll have to show it out. We'll get it.
We expect you to use the stairs carrying those all day.
Consider it done. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hey, I just want to thank Vice Chair Geddes for his partnership, Dean Gould for all his efforts, the Chancellor for always being available, the board for your support, presidents and NG staff. But the most important one is my wife, who I think is ready to divorce me because she says all the time, NG? Yeah. So she's sick of me being on the phone. So it would be nice not to be on the phone all the time, but it's been an honor and a privilege to have done this 4 times during my time on the board. But it's time for a change, and I need to work on some other stuff. So thank you so much for your support. With that, we're going to go to item number 30, NG Public Records Policy.
Good morning. My name is Joe Reynolds, the Chief Legal Counsel for NG. Thank you, Chair Page, for putting this matter in discussion regarding public records on today's agenda. As everyone, I believe on the board knows and in this room knows how important transparency and disclosure is to our democracy. You know, it's what sets partly the United States apart from other governments in the world. Having to disclose public records is sometimes inconvenient. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's also a part of what we do as we've chosen to be in the public realm and engage in public service. When we use public resources, when we have discussions on public matters and on public time, the public has a right to know what we're doing. And it's that fundamental core value that underscores our public records laws and policies today. And what we wanted to do in the discussion today is to present an overview of what we have in our handbook regarding public records laws, how we compare to some other state government entities, and also then discuss some recent changes in Senate Bill 287 that the Nevada legislature recently passed, and how that might impact what we do here at INCHI going forward. And the overall goal, for me at least as Chief Legal Counsel, is to make sure that INCHI and the Board of Regents are always engaged in the best practices. And in order to do that, it requires a constant self-evaluation and reflection on what we do and how we do it. We recently hired a new lawyer at INCHI, Deputy General Counsel Zelalem Boghali. He's been tasked with being our primary contact for public records, and so I'd like to turn the presentation over to him.
Chair Page, members of the Board of Regents, presidents, distinguished guests, I'm Zelalem Boghali, Deputy General Counsel for System Administration at the Nevada System of Higher Education. I have been designated the custodian, I suppose, of public records for the system. And so make sure you had enough coffee, because we're going to talk about public records by PowerPoint. The Nevada Public Records Act, as you all know, is codified in NRS Chapter 239. As Joe just mentioned, the whole point, and this is codified in the statute, the whole point of this statute is to foster democratic principles. It's to give the public a window into the work we're doing. And the legislature has said we are to construe the provisions in that chapter liberally to make sure that those public records are provided to the public. There's a presumption in there. It favors disclosure unless it's otherwise declared confidential. And there are various provisions throughout the statutes that make certain personnel records and other things confidential. It's the burden of the government to show that a record is confidential or shouldn't be disclosed. That goes with the presumption. The presumption favors disclosure, and if the public agency does not want to disclose, we have to explain why. In making these determinations, we must balance the public's right to know versus the need for confidentiality. Fees. So this is one of the main reasons we wanted to bring this to the board. In this statute, Nevada law says a governmental entity may charge a fee. You don't have to, but you may, for providing a copy of a public record. And if you do charge a fee, it must not exceed the actual cost of providing it. The public agency must maintain a list of the charged fees at each office. And of course, the fee may be waived. Now, a special kind of fee contained in the public record statute is a fee called extraordinary use fee. Extraordinary use of technological and personnel resources. Of course, the legislature didn't define what that means, but it did set a limit. And it said if you're going to charge an extraordinary use fee, it cannot exceed 50 cents per page. Of course, the fee must be reasonable and based on the actual use of resources. So, it's been interpreted to mean personnel time, costs. And so when I do public records requests for NCHI, it's often hours of work in reviewing the records, deciding what to redact, if anything, contacting the individuals that it pertains to. It's a long process. And so if I was to determine how much work I've done on each record, I mean, it would be a lot. And so what reasonable means in that context, I'm not sure, but that is stated in there. Of course, you must give prior notice of the fee that you're going to charge to the requester. Now, that's the statute. Our handbook has codified some of those provisions to apply to the Board of Regents and all of NCHI institutions. So Title IV, Chapter 1, Section 31 of the handbook says that each institution must designate an official custodian of records, and that the records request must be promptly accommodated. The Procedures and Guidelines Manual has more provisions that are kind of about fees. So each institution may establish its own policy in terms of fees. So we don't really have a uniform policy. We have these provisions, but it does say institutions may establish their own policy. That we charge 10 cents per page after 20 pages, and the actual cost of a CD or DVD if we're providing one. Now, we went ahead and defined extraordinary use. So extraordinary use means more than 2 hours per employee to locate, format, review, redact the public record. We define reasonable as well, of a cost not to exceed 50 cents per page, but that's aligned with the maximum amount we can charge for extraordinary use under the statute. And of course, prior notice. Now, another part of our provision in the PGM is we must actually collect the entire fee before work begins on getting the public record. And in certain cases, that has prevented us from providing public records because, certain people can't pay the entire fee. So we surveyed a lot of public agencies in the state to determine what everyone else is doing. So the city of Henderson, for example, charges 10 cents per page, $1 per disc, an extraordinary use fee of 50 cents per page after 10 hours. The City of Sparks charges 5 cents per page, $1 per desk, an extraordinary use fee of 50 cents per page after 2 hours, which is similar to ours. The City of North Las Vegas Fire Department, for example, charges $1 per page, right? $2 per disc. This just shows you all how various and ununiform the standards are in the state. Now here are a few more. The Clark County School District, 25 cents per page, and that's over $10. $5 per disc if there's more than one disc. So the first disc is free. An extraordinary use fee not to exceed 50 cents per page after 1 hour. Washoe County here, extraordinary use fee not to exceed 50 cents per page after 2 hours. And the fee is the average hourly wage of the lowest compensated employee available. So that, I mean, that's very specific. But this is what the law has allowed when it didn't define what this meant. The Attorney General's office, 5 cents per page over $10, $5 per disc, right? An extraordinary use fee of 50 cents after 2 hours per page. And the hourly rate for extraordinary time is based on the employee who's doing the work. So you can just see from this how all over the map these policies are. I think that's why the legislature decided to pass Senate Bill 287. So in Senate Bill 287, the legislature did some pretty radical things, and I think they're important. It eliminated the 50 cents fee for extraordinary use of personnel time. Just got rid of it. It clarified the fee to be the actual cost to the government entity. So toner, ink, actual cost of paper if you're providing a hard copy. Does not include overhead or labor costs. Which means, you know, I should just step back a little bit. That means if a custodian of a public record is working 10 hours on a request to redact, review, do legal research on it, we can't charge for that. In the bill, it says extraordinary use is gone if it's part of your ordinary duties. And of course, if a requester isn't given their request in time, they can apply for a court order and they can actually sue the public agency for violating the public records statute. That's it. Joe's going to come back and explain sort of the larger picture and how SB 287 applies to our public records statutes.
Question from Vice Chair Geddes.
Thank you, and sorry, I'm not sure if you're going to cover this, and maybe I shouldn't ask the question, but there was that last line about the fee could be up to $250,000, and I know that got amended in the last version. You're going to cover that? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, I can. And thank you, Vice Chair Geddes. There was a significant conversation in front of the legislature regarding originally penalties that could be imposed upon a government entity for failure to comply with provisions of NRS Chapter 239. I believe that those were amended so that a first violation is $1,000. And there is also in that penalty is deposited into a state account, and I believe that goes to archives, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I believe so. And then there is a penalty for a second violation, and then also a third violation, I think up to $10,000 if that occurs within a 10-year period.
And in the original bill, it was the actual person was named as the person who was supposed to get the record. That got amended to be the actual agency, correct?
That is correct, Vice Chair Geddes. And that did cause concern amongst many state government entities that an individual person could be held liable for that amount. And that did get amended out.
Regent Trachow?
So Joe, the state agency charges another state agency the fine, and then that fine goes from the state coffers into the archives budget.
That is correct, Regent Trachak. And I believe at least the rationale was to remove a profit motive from anyone making a complaint. That even though they make the allegation and there's a fine assessed, they don't personally benefit from that. But the government entity is certainly dinged for not complying.
And what is the definition of public record under the new act?
I'll turn this over to Zalal.
Thank you for the question, Regent Trachak. It hasn't changed. The only thing it changed was expanding the term to say public book or public record. A public record is any paper that is recorded by a public agency in the course of its ordinary business, and that's the same, and that stayed the same throughout this bill.
And I would add, it is more even expansive than that. As our technology has increased, the conversations, and I know that courts around the country have begun to hold, public records also includes email communications. Some of it have gone into text messaging and other forms of electronic communication in addition to just hard paper documents. And so to wrap up, with the passage of Senate Bill 287, we will need to likely amend provisions of our handbook and come back to the board to make sure, especially with the respect of the extraordinary use fee, that is compliant with the new NRS provisions. We are working with all the institutions to make sure that we're engaged in best practices. We are higher education. We should be able to lead on this issue and be as transparent as possible. But the caveats are, we have 2 medical schools that deal with medical records. We have over 100,000 students that have protections under FERPA. Also significant personnel employee information that's also protected by federal law. And so all those concerns need to be balanced. But to ensure the board, we're doing everything that we can as your lawyers to comply with best practices, to be as transparent and accountable as possible.
Vice Chair Geddes.
Thank you. Joe and Z, I'm not sure which, but when looking at that, it basically, when we first had this request for you all to look at what our practices were, because system office and institutions were all charging different rates or not charging, or various things out there, the way 287 came out is all those various charges that we're doing right now, those all go away, and it's just straight hard time, not man hours, but straight physical costs that we incur, and that's the only charge that's out there. And how long do we have? I know we've gotten some requests that say give us all records for the last 4 years. How long do we have now to give them an estimate of what those hard costs are so that they can pay those before we get into it?
My understanding, we're in 287 was amended, I believe, as recently as last weekend. So we're still taking a look at that. But I believe it's still an initial 5-day period from when you receive a request that you're required to give an initial response and an estimate. And Vice Chair Geddes, these conversations are kind of where the rubber hits the road, where the philosophy behind the open, transparent government also interacts with some practical concerns about employee resources and technological resources, and having to accommodate sometimes very voluminous requests, and also those sometimes that are very small and easy to do that can be fulfilled within a few minutes.
And I just would encourage you, when you're working with all the campuses and you're looking at the policy, that we start tracking how much time is actually being spent on this, and time by who, so we have a sense of the fiscal impact of this.
We are working with the institutions on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move the agenda on item 18, legislative report and biennial budget update. And I just want to caution everyone that we will not be talking whatsoever about the COLA issue. That will be at next week's special meeting. And with that, I need to turn it over to Vice Chair Geddes because I've got a call that I got to jump on that I can't miss. So.
Can I make a quick Thank you, Vice Chair. I just want to elaborate a little bit on what Chair Pace said. The reason that I've advised them not to talk about COLA is only because it wasn't agendized to speak about it in a particular way, and I didn't want to have an issue. So that's one of the reasons we're having the special meeting next Friday, so that that can be properly agendized. There was no other reason that we're not talking about that today. Thank you.
If I could, we will have a joint presentation done by Michael Flores. We'll address a lot of the legislative bills that were passed, and then they'll be followed by our CFO, Andrew Klinger, to talk about a lot of the financial implications in the bills that were passed that impact on our operating budget and our capital budgets. Thanks.
Vice Chair Geddes, Michael Flores for the record, members of the Board of Regents. First off, thank you for hearing this issue and this item. And I just want to start by thanking you all for your help and support and direction during this legislative session. And also specifically want to thank the presidents for their involvement this session in this process, which I'm going to try to get 120 days into 10 minutes, so bear with me as we go through this. And I do want to take a moment to thank Western Nevada College President Dr. Vince Solis for his hospitality while we were in Carson City. He gave us space at his college for all of our institutions to work out of, and even let me a key to his house if I needed anything at all. So very grateful for your support and help, President Solis, so thank you. As we wrapped up the 80th legislative session this Monday, it literally went up to the last hour. We were tracking 96 bills, and there were 1,179 bills heard this session. Obviously, we have members of the legislature, but there were 13 new elected legislators that we had to work with to educate them on what NSHE is, and we had 3 appointed as well that were members of the legislature this session. We met with every member of the legislature before and during the session, so they knew our issues. There we go. And obviously, we had everything centered around our 5 goals that the board adopted, and everything came back to these 5 goals when we were in the building. I want to give a big shout out and thanks to our legislative team. Kyle Dalpy, who joined us in January and hit the ground running, was really helpful to make sure that we were increasing our communication among campus reps and also regents as well as presidents. And I'm just very grateful for our team that we had up in Carson City. And Joy Holiday, too, who is not here today, she was really instrumental, made sure that we were communicating with you all every single week. And that was really critical to make sure you all were in the loop with everything. And, who you don't see on there is our cabinet. And our cabinet did so much work this legislative session, working late hours. And I can't thank our team enough, specifically Crystal Alba, who was in the building, I think, as much as I was, testifying on bills and representing us and answering very technical questions about how we increase access and move the needle on higher education. We had 3 new government affairs representatives that were in the building during the session: Marianne Kewen, Tracy Bauer, and Anthony Ruiz, who represented Nevada State College, Desert Research, and the College of Southern Nevada. And I can't say enough about our team because, they really helped make sure that we were unified and on the same page. There were no questions about one institution doing something and the other not. We were all on the same page. And the way we did this, we changed it up a little this session and had weekly meetings with all of our campus reps. So every Wednesday at 11 a.m. we had a call. So for the institutions who were not in the building, they were able to call in and get weekly updates on what was happening, and we were able to respond quickly to what was happening in the building. We also had weekly meetings with the chair and vice chair and the chancellor. So if there was something that we needed to discuss, we kept everybody in the loop. And obviously we sent out updates every single Friday to regents. And then we also had campus days. Actually, I'll get back to that in a minute. But one thing we're going to do in a couple of weeks or maybe in a couple of months is we're going to have a retreat with all of our government affairs reps to really talk about what happened this session, what worked, what didn't work, and talk about what we need to do in the interim to work better together as a team. And I can't emphasize that enough, how strong our team was. We had campus days at the legislature this year where our team made sure that every single institution was represented. Here you can see Great Basin College, TMCC, Nevada State College, and obviously CSN were in the building. This is the first session that I've been there where every single institution was seen at the legislature. And we got a lot of feedback from legislators, and they were happy to see so much representation from all the institutions statewide. And now some of our policy updates. Prison education, which was a pilot program that was ran out of CSN. It was passed during the 2017 legislative session. It was funded and also included an expansion for Western Nevada College, Truckee Mills Community College, and this was a project that was a big focus of Governor Sisolak, and he mentioned the state of the state, and as you can see here, he even visited High Desert Correctional Facility in Southern Nevada as he was coming up to Carson City to start the legislative session. State-supported financial aid programs. Governor Gwinn Scholarship was funded. There were some questions about how it would be funded, as that happens every session. It received an appropriation of $33 million. One change that happened is that they moved the GPA requirement to 2.75 to maintain consistency within the program. Originally, when you received it, you only had to have 2.6, and then you'd have to maintain it at 2.75. Now it's 2.75, and it'll stay consistent there. The Governor Gwinn the scholarship, there was a focus for teachers that had 2 scholarships attached to it. They increased that to 4. And then the Silver State Opportunity Grant, one big change that was made was that any leftover dollars, once all 15 credit students were awarded their award, they would be opened up to 12 credit students. And they received an appropriation, that scholarship received an appropriation of $10 million for the biennium. And then next, the Promise Scholarship received a lot of attention as well. SB 350, and I want to thank Vice Chancellor McKinnon too for all of his work on this and the community colleges. There were a number of technical changes that needed to be made to this scholarship, which Senator Dennis carried and made the changes. It was it received an appropriation for $4.5 million, and it will really strengthen the program to make sure that students are able to take advantage of this. During the first cohort, we were able to see some challenges that students were facing through the process. So the legislature was willing to take a look at that and address that. During the session, a number of bills came up that they wanted to expand access and financial aid support. These 2 did not pass, but have been told that they will likely come back next session. One was the Battleborn Scholarship, which expanded the Silver State Opportunity Grant to the universities. And then the Promise Reconnect would expand the Promise Scholarship to non-high school graduates, so everybody else as they do in Tennessee, and also with a lower credit threshold. Other NSHE-related legislation that we were monitoring was AGR 5, which passed out of the legislature and now will go to the vote of the people in 2020. And there are a couple other bills to restructure the Board of Regents, which did not pass. And then there was a big focus on workforce, and WIN funding is going to continue. And I'll let Andrew Klinger, I apologize, talk a little bit more about those appropriations that were given. A collective bargaining bill was passed for our classified employees, and the NFA bill unfortunately did not pass. And then prevailing wage did pass. AB 136 that was sponsored by Speaker Frierson did pass. And with that, I will hand it over to CFO Klinger, and will be available for any questions.
Good morning. Morning, Chair Geddes, Regents. Get my bearings here.
You can always tell a CFO why their budget book.
It's a big green button. There we go. So I thought I'd start this morning by going back to the Board of Regents request that was made in August. And as you remember, we had a very specific number that we were looking to request at that point in time. And so when you add up all of the caseload numbers and enhancements our request to the governor at that time was 124 million in what I would call new money. You have the base budget, and then the new money with caseload and enhancements was 124 million dollars. And included in that was the capacity building, summer school, performance pool, and then some of the other enhancements that were part of that overall request. Out of the governor's budget, they ended up cutting about $23 million out of that request. That was the summer school and the performance funding pool. And they made some changes to the caseload numbers as well. It was related to the CTE, but those changes were relatively minor. So out of that, we came out with our capacity enhancement, the UNLV School of Medicine ramp up, prison education, and then the governor did add in his budget as well, the Nevada Teach program at UNR. Legislatively approved budget. So out of the legislatively approved budget, they ended up cutting 32.2 million of the governor's request, and that came in several areas, and I'll go through that with you. The first is in the caseload funding for the growth. We had used, when we had prepared our budget, we had used fiscal 19, the weighted student credit hour rate. Because remember, the formula is funded off of weighted student credit hours times a rate. And so the rate for fiscal year 19 was 156.01 per weighted student credit hour. That was a change from what has been done historically. Historically, we have used fiscal year 18 as a starting point. And so the legislature, when they approved this, they made that switch primarily, I think, because it saved some dollars, because instead of at 156.01, it was at 153.18, which was a reduction of $390,000 per year, roughly.
Sorry.
Yes.
What fiscal year do all the other state agencies use?
All the other state agencies, I mean, they're not formula driven. They use a base budget year of fiscal 18.
Okay.
In the capacity building, so this was an area where when the subcommittees closed our budgets, they made a reduction to the capacity building enhancements. And what they did in this case is they cut the capacity enhancements from the two universities for both years. So a little over $20 million was taken out just in the capacity enhancements. They fully funded our request for the UNLV School of Medicine, fully funded the prison education program. Some of the other cuts that were made, one was the elimination of UNLV Research O&M, $1.7 million per year. This is an item that was a special allocation that was put in UNLV's budget in 2013, and the intent of these funds was to help the university grow and expand their research capacity. And so this one came as a surprise that they cut this out, because this essentially was a base budget cut to UNLV. The other one that came as, well, a lot of them came as surprises, but another one that they cut was the elimination of what they called one-time funding in the base, again, out of CTE. So remember, in the last legislative session, they provided additional weighting for CTE courses in the community colleges. So this year, in the course of going through the budgets, the legislative analyst had identified some items that he considered as one-time items, and so they cut those items. That was about $3.1 million per year. And even though that funding was, or those weights were allocated for the community colleges, because of the way the funding formula works, when you cut $3.1 million a year out of the base budget, it impacts the institutions proportionate to their weighted student credit hours. So this $3.1 million cut hit UNLV the hardest, followed by UNR, followed by CSN, just based on the weighted student credit hours, because they have the highest proportionate share. So you would think the CTE funding would come out of the community colleges, but because of the way the formula funding works, it actually impacted all of the institutions, and those with higher weighted student credit hours were hit harder. elimination of some one-time funding at DRI, and then the reduction in funding for the dental school, and this was essentially an offset for what they saw as an increase in non-resident tuition. So that increase in non-resident tuition, they offset the difference and reduce the general fund as a result. On the capital improvement projects, this is the board's request, Nevada State College, Education Building, the CSN Health and Sciences Building, the UNLV Engineering, Academic and Research Building. Those were the three top construction projects, and then the planning projects below those. In the governor's budget, he had included the first two projects in his recommendation. And then when the legislature approved it, they obviously included those projects, but then they added some of our other projects. So they added the UNLV engineering building. On the slide, it says $40 million. I want to clarify that $40 million. It's 20 state and 20 institution funds. That's the total. The other numbers on there are the state funding, but that one ended up being on the slide is the total number. So 62 million in state funds for the education building, 77 million in state funds, or 71 million, sorry. 71 million for the CSN building, 56 million in state funds for the education building, 20 million for the engineering building, and then they also included GCB's planning project for $459,000, again state funds, and then WNC their planning project for $105,000.
Andrew? On the UNLV engineering building, I know when we originally approved it, it was 18 and 18 for a total of 36. And then when State Public Works Board did the adjustments, it ended up being a $66 million, 33 and 33.
Correct.
So if they are giving us, if it's 20 and 20 for a total of 40 million, do we have to reduce scope, or do we have to redesign or raise more private money, or did they think Public Works numbers were off?
Or phases too.
Huh?
The other discussion was doing phase approach.
And Chair Geddes, I have not had that discussion with UNLV, so I'm not sure what the plan is, but it would have to be one of those three options, either phase in or additional institution funds.
But the bill's written as 20 and 20.
The bill is written as 20 and 20. That is correct.
President Mian?
If I may, so what we're intending to do is to do it in a phased approach, so that we can start, because we're shovel ready with the planning money. We have the complete construction documents completed. So the intent is to start to phase it, and so we can start right away.
And Vice Chair Geddes too. And the 20 million of state dollars wasn't the intention to cover the whole cost of it. So I don't think that was a comment at all on the cost that State Public Works came up. That was how much money they had to actually add to it.
Thank you.
Other issues, compensation-related issues, legislature obviously did not include in their approved budget any funds for what was on our supplemental budget list, and that was the professional salary compaction issue. Remember, that was the top priority of the Board of Regents on the supplemental request issue. But one note, in AB 543, there was previously language in prior appropriations bills that restricted the use of general fund for merit increases, and so they actually removed that language. So the bill this time did not include that language. And then I know we're not talking about the COLA, but just to mention in AB 542, which is the bill that funds the salary increases, they did appropriate 12.7 a year to what they call the State Board of Examiners Salary Adjustment Account for NCHE's share of the 3% cost of living adjustments. And then just some important notes as far as language, what we call back language in the Authorizations and Appropriations Act. In the Authorizations Act, they did allow us to
keep our student fees essentially without going to IFC. We do have to report back to IFC, and there is specific language in there that's been in there since 2013 that doesn't allow increased student tuition and registration fees to offset general fund. There was a question of whether or not that was going to be included at some point, but ultimately they did include that language. Section 22 of the Authorizations Act allows us to expend or carry forward non-general fund dollars into the next fiscal year. And then AB 543, Section 59 allows us to transfer general fund between the various accounts if needed with IFC approval. And then finally, this is just a list of the other supplemental requests. The one on the list that was funded was the prison education program. And with that, I'll be happy to take any more questions.
Do we have any questions? Regent Dubrava?
Maybe just clarification on page 18, when legislative approved NSHE funding capacity building. So is that the part when I talk to my friends and I say, hey, it was great that our 2 universities reached R1 status, that instead of being rewarded by the legislature, they were actually punished? I refer to the capacity building. Is that to be accurate when I talk to my friends?
Well, and when you look at, and we had sent out a letter, when you look at not only the capacity enhancement funding, when you look at the CTE funding and the impact that had on the universities, and then the Knowledge Fund, which in the governor's budget was 10 million and was reduced to 2.5. And when you look historically at what our access to the Knowledge Funds have been, I think in fiscal year 18 it was around 15 million. So when you add up Knowledge Fund, CTE, capacity enhancements, my estimation is that the impact on research capacity was over $30 million.
Regent Trachop.
Is the presentation over? Because I don't have questions. I have some comments and a request for the chairman. So I can hold that until the chancellor and the vice chancellors are finished with the discussion, or I can raise those now.
Are there any other questions or comments from members? I would just like to also mention Sonia, Anthony, Elena, Luis, Carrie, and Mark, who were all staff members assisting the legislative team for their respective campuses. And Regent Trachop.
Thank you. And I'd like to quote Professor Unger from yesterday. The question I have, and I think the question all of us should have, is how did this happen? And where do we find the resources going forward? And to follow on from what Regent Dubrava said regarding the research funding and the Knowledge Fund, the results of this are both disconcerting and terribly disappointing. This is what happened with good times, very good economic times in the state. We had a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, and what we decided to do was to eat our seed corn being CTE funding and research funding. What was a little concerning to me during the whole process of the legislature, it was always 80 degrees and sunny, and then we discover at the end that we have what's been described many times as these surprises, and quite frankly, these surprises go to the heart of what we're doing here at higher education. I would ask that the board drive, Mr. New Chairman, a top-to-bottom review of our legislative team, take a look at what we spent in terms of our actual out-of-pocket costs and the work that was done, and whether or not it was possible for us to be able to determine ahead of time what in fact was going on, so that we had the opportunity to find that out. I don't know if it was possible to glean that, but I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to study this so this doesn't happen again, because this is inexcusable. One thing we can't do, we've worked too hard, is we can't let R1 slip through our fingers. the only thing that could possibly be worse than not being designated at our two research universities is R1 is to lose that status. And I do know that our two presidents will be doing everything they can to make sure that we maintain that funding stream to fund the research so that we maximize our opportunity the next time Carnegie does its review, which I believe in about 2 years. One of my suggestions would be, of course, we could cut into our subsidies of athletics to help fund the research, but I think that I'll have trouble getting the votes on that. I think it's also incumbent upon all of the presidents to take a look at where we are. Again, this is in a very good economy, so good that we spent $750 million of taxpayer dollars to fund the construction of a stadium, and this is the result for higher education. I think it's incumbent upon all of the presidents to defer nice-to-have projects and start focusing on our core mission and the core values of higher education. And finally, I think it's incumbent upon everybody involved in higher education to reach out to everybody, both the legislators, the governor, all our friends and our colleagues, and make sure that we make the case of why higher education is so important to them. Because if the push comes from the citizenry, from fellow Nevadans, then perhaps we can avoid a situation like we had with this last session. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Regent Hayes?
Thank you very much. I just jumped on the call about, while Regent DeBravo was talking, so this has been covered in this one. I'll just talk to folks offline. But I was just curious about how in the governor's budget, there was the $20 million for capacity enhancement and not the UNLV School of Engineering. Yet that flipped in the last days of session. How did that $20 million get moved over there?
Chair Geddes, through you to Regent Hayes, I don't necessarily think it was moved over there because they're really different pots of money. What they use to fund capital improvement projects is typically one-time money. So in the money that they took from the capacity enhancements, even though it's one time for us, I mean, it's in their fiscal 20, fiscal 21 buckets of money, if you will, and so it's ongoing money for them. And so presumably they put that money for the capacity enhancements somewhere else in the legislatively approved budget. And so I don't necessarily think those two things are related.
Thank you. Regent Lieberman.
Follow up on what Regent Trachuk has said. It is inappropriate and unrealistic for 13 regents to be involved with the day-to-day operations of the legislature during the session, but it is very appropriate for the regents to have a say and an input into how we staff the legislature and how we have a presence there and how we replace the position previously held by Vice Chancellor Brooks and other people, and we need to actively participate in that discussion with the Chancellor on how that staffing should move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. See no other questions, we'll close item number 18. We'll move on to item number 19, strategies for closing the achievement gap. Chancellor Riley.
Thank you, Vice Chair Geddes. So what's before you today is a summary of the summit we had on closing the achievement gap. Each of the regions participated in this. This is central to one of the strategic goals. And one of the things that we discussed at that summit was that many of the strategies that we talked about for overall student success, if done well, will benefit our underrepresented populations. The other discussion that came out of this is just reflecting the diversity of our state at our institutions, while laudable, is not enough. We have to close the gap. And so with our underrepresented populations, our African-American population, Latino population, our Pell Grant students, that they should be graduating at the same rate as our other students. And so what's central to this goal, unlike the 2025 goals that we established in the Student Success Summit for each of our institutions and the year persistent rates, we didn't establish separate goals for underrepresented population. Our goal is to eliminate the equity gap by 2025. So the discussions of that summit, the ongoing work for each of our institutions kind of reflect that strategy. The matrix that you see in front of you just is a summary of what currently is happening at each of our institutions. A lot of that is really focused, what we heard both at the Student Success Summit and what we heard with the experts who came in on closing the equity gap was a real need to focus on intrusive high-touch student support programs for minority and underrepresented student populations. As each of the institutions discussed, the programs that we're implementing are extremely effective. They are, when implemented and funded, they work. The real challenge is that how do we build the scale? How do we increase those efforts to impact larger populations? We also talked about the need to look at culturally responsive professional development and strategies to both recruit and retain minority faculty and staff, because we know from the research that when our faculty and our staff reflect the diversity of our student populations, that is highly correlated to success of many of our minority populations. And then lastly, we talked about the department level student success data and looking at the need for these equitable outcomes, and that each of that, the need for each of the institutions to not only have that data, but share that data at the appropriate levels of the institution to ensure that departments and faculty of those institutions understand the outcomes they have of all populations. So with that, this was just intended to be a summary to capture what was discussed at the Student Success Summit. Primarily the work is being done at each of our institutions to further the goal of the board. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions. Again, that was more or less just a summary of what occurred.
See no questions or comments, we will close item number 19. We'll go to item number 20, academic partnerships and shared business services between GBC and UNR. President Helens and President
We're
Johnson.
going to stay here if that's okay.
That is fine.
Thanks. Well, good afternoon, or good morning, I guess still. President Johnson and I would like to bring to your attention an MOU that we entered into together. And it only represents 3 collaborations, and we actually have a lot more going on. But you get to a point where when you codify something, it becomes a little more real for the institutions. And so that's what was in front of you. We won't be reading it, but I did want to tell you the story behind it. The Board of Regents had their meeting 2 years ago, September, in Elko, and I was brand new with about a month behind me. So that was the first time I was able to meet President Johnson and Provost Carmen. We went out to dinner. And Mark doesn't beat around the bush, and he said to me right up front, how do you see us working together? And that's how I preferred to work too. And I said, well, first of all, I don't see us as competitors. I do want to collaborate because what I care about is creating a well-lighted pathway for our students. And so I'm not adverse, I told him, to having big conversations or difficult ones. And he said, great, that's what I want to do too. Let's start talking right now. And that was even before we ordered. By November, President Johnson set up a meeting of our executive teams and here in Reno, and we immediately paired off and we started working and doing things. So this MOU, again, is just codifying 3 areas: an academic area where we streamline pathways for rural students to augment educational opportunities through upper division biology courses. And of course, we have our police consolidation, but obviously with our distance, it's not like we're going to call for a police car to come over, but there are so many other things we can do: investigations and reportings, policies, and also grant opportunities, which was important. And then I think probably the biggest one is our back office processes where we align and leverage commonalities. And that has really saved us quite a bit of money, and we're just scratching the surface. I also think that what's important in the MOU is right there, and I think it's the second paragraph, because what it says is that the University of Nevada, Reno, and Great Basin College, we see our collaboration really as fulfilling our missions. You know, we're not merging, we're not changing names, but we're working together because of these commonalities. And also, we're fulfilling NSHE strategic goals, which really are our own goals, and that we're being good fiscal stewards. So that's why we've brought this together and created this MOU with 3 things. And I'll just turn this over to President Johnson, if you'd like to say some things.
Thank you, President Helens. I appreciate President Helens' openness and leadership to collaborate. And I especially want to thank our vice presidents for finance, our provosts, and our vice presidents for student services for jumping right on it. We had a dinner together, essentially all 8 of us at one point, and we set some goals. The vice presidents paired off and really looked for win-win solutions. It's not costing UNR anything. It's not costing GBC anything. We actually identified win-win solutions, and where there's a win-win solution, we sealed the deal. As President Helens notes, this is just an ordering agreement. We have a MOU that says we will continue to work together, and each specific activity is put into an addendum or an appendix, and we will be developing more appendices. We won't have to come and report to the board every time, but we just wanted to tell you what was possible, and we will continue to collaborate without so many trumpets next time. So thanks to GBC. There are great things we can do together.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Regent Trachuk?
I have a comment. I just want to applaud both of the presidents. This is exactly what we've been pushing for the last 8 years that I've been on this board. And I encourage our presidents continue to see those areas where we can save money and deliver a better product for our students. Thank you both.
Regent Del Carlo?
Thank you. I too want to applaud. I think this is really the gist of shared governance. One system, and we are leveraging the strengths of that system. And I mean, I think this should be a model too. I know Dr. Hilgerson and I have been accepted to present at the ACCT Leadership Conference in October in San Francisco, and this is a prime example that we'll take forward of how one system and the shared governance model work so brilliantly. So thank you, Regent Trachuk, over your tenure for setting that pathway, because this is really what all the institutions should be doing, and you're showing the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, definitely more money for the classroom, and to Regent Trachuk's earlier statements, these are the good times. We need to make sure that we're utilizing our resources as possible when the bad times come. And it's a shame Chair Page wasn't in here, because this is his primary issue. Seeing no other questions or comments, we'll go to item number 21, MGM College Opportunity Program, update and fee schedule. Chancellor Riley.
Thank you. Vice Chair Geddes, members of the board, in September of last year, in this very room, the Board of Regents approved a memorandum of understanding with MGM Resorts International, Nevada's largest employer. The MOU established the MGM College Opportunity Program, one of the first of its kind in the nation, whereby a Fortune 500 company partners with an entire system of higher education to offer employees free education through high-quality, online degrees and certificate programs. Since last fall, there has been a considerable work with MGM and our degree granting institutions as the program plans to admit its first cohort of students this coming fall semester. I want to express my sincere gratitude to the many individuals from across our colleges, universities, SCS, and system administration who spent countless hours working to launch this program and provide a seamless process for MGM employees. As you'll see in a few minutes, the interest has been quite high from MGM employees, and the vast majority of students are looking to attain a certificate, associate, or bachelor's degree. Today, you'll hear a presentation on the current status of the MGM College Opportunity Program, and we are asking the board to formally approve the itemized fee schedule for its program, consistent with the MOU the board approved in September 2018. I'd like to ask Vice Chancellor Nate McKinnon and NSHE Senior Learning Concierge Danielle Donato to provide an update and an overview of the action being requested by the board today.
Vice Chancellor McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the members. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. And very excited to be here today to talk to you about the MGM College Opportunity Program, or the MGM COP, that we've been working on. And as the Chancellor stated, it was in this room last September that the MOU was approved. So we're going to walk you through today some data, and I want to point out that the first part of the data will be the interest in the program. That's students who, employees rather, who raise their hand at an MGM property or headquarters office saying, I might be interested in this. And then we will actually also review the applicants, which are individual employees who took it a step further and applied for admission directly into one of our programs at one of our institutions. And so we'll cover each of those today, as well as an overview of our work done to date. So the purpose and overview, the program's partnership, and basically opportunity to enroll in designated online degree or certificate programs at any of our NSHE colleges or universities. And the COP will cover the costs for courses required for the degree or certificate program that the employee is enrolled into. We have overall, we're going to see today the timeline, our data review, the communication that's happened with students, our next steps in the process, and any discussion. And then we are, as the Chancellor stated, asking for you to formally approve the fee schedule that's consistent with the MOU from last year. So first, the timeline. Last year in September, MOU was signed. October, we began looking at the online lists of degree programs to identify which ones would be eligible for this. Not all online degree programs make sense to fit with this program. Part of that is MGM's decision. So for example, they don't want to pay for a student doing an RN to BSN online degree program, as it doesn't really fit with and their employees and their mission overall. But other than that, they're very open to what types of programs individual students want to go into. So contrary to some opinion, this is not entirely targeted towards just hospitality programs, for example, and is really about the upward social mobility for MGM employees. In December, we took a group to Arizona State University to spend just half a day with the folks there to learn about the Starbucks ASU model and how they launched it, learned about the hiccups they had along the way, and it was a really good opportunity for us. And one of the things they made clear that we've consistently come back to as a team here is to keep it simple. Keep it simple for institutions, keep it simple for students, and try and keep it simple for the company as well. In January, we worked on our points of contact and also created individual websites that all look the same at our institutions that redirect interested MGM employees to what's called the My MGM portal. That's where a student actually goes, or an MGM employee goes, to raise their hand and request approval for eligibility or verification of eligibility. And on the MGM side, that includes things like having worked at the company for 6 months, having a clean disciplinary record, and so on and so forth, to make sure that the employee is eligible to participate. In April, we hired our NSHE Senior Learning Concierge, Danielle Donato, and you'll hear from her in just a minute. We also got our final list of data of students who were approved as eligible, over 1,200 students, and our Points of contact began in earnest, reaching out to the students to try and encourage them to ensure they took the next step of applying and completing their FAFSA at our institutions. The deadline for that was on May 15th. It was originally May 1st, but MGM opted to extend it a few weeks to give employees a little bit more time, and now we also created our discount fee schedule. So this is basically the data of our interested applicants pool, if you will. So this is the original approved eligible employees, just under 1,200. And as you can see there, very strong interest at both the associate's and bachelor's degree program, and you'll see that even magnified when we show you the data of who applied. Breaking it down by institution, UNLV, there were 370 students interested, and the types of degrees programs that they were interested in there in particular, with again, more than 50% being interested in bachelor's degrees. CSN had 408 employees interested, with 75% being interested in associate degree programs. TMCC had 25 students originally interested, and it's actually gone up from that. So 44% looking at associates and 32% at bachelor's degree programs. UNR, 110 employees. And I'll point out that at UNR, there's only a online master's degree program and the online executive master's in business administration program. And so some of this, we believe, was, this was a question for MGM employees of which program are you interested in? You could have chosen master's or executive master's. So we believe there's some crossover of people who probably chose master's and actually wanted the executive master's degree program as well out of that original pool of 110. The Great Basin College, 87. And I'd point out that Great Basin College has the largest number of fully online degree programs in our system. I think that's been something that's certainly come out of necessity at GBC given the size of their service area. But when you look at the list of eligible programs, the institution that has the largest number of fully online programs is GBC. WNC had 16 interested employees with a split between certificate and associate's degrees. We also had 173 individual employees who were undecided. They said, I want to participate in this program, I want to go to college, but I don't know what degree or program I want to go into. So I need help with that. That's where our NSHE Senior Learning Concierge came in, directly connecting with all of those students to try and have one-on-one sessions with them, talk about career goals, and understand where they want to go and which programs across the NSHE institutions might best suit them and help them get there. The program is open nationally to all MGM properties -2 that for reasons on MGM's side that they are not yet online for this program. So that means we have students from Virginia, Atlantic City, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., California, all around the country participating in this program. The original interest, though, and this is, I think, reflective of MGM's overall enrollments, was that 72% of the students were from Nevada and 28% were from out of state. And we break that down by institution, I think it's no surprise that the overwhelming majority of in-state students were looking at, in particular, UNLV and CSN. And so the reason for that is most likely brand awareness. Nearly all of the MGM employees located in the state of Nevada live in the greater Clark County area, as there are no properties outside of that area or MGM offices outside of that area anymore. I would point out also that you've probably noticed we don't have Nevada State on here. So at this time, the only fully online degree program at Nevada State is the RN to BSN. And as I mentioned, MGM was not interested in funding that. Okay, so actually, I'm gonna go back. We just last week got our application numbers from the institutions, and so telling us of these students who were actually interested, which we knew back in late May, we now know, or mid-May rather, we now know how many students applied to our institutions for this first cohort in the fall. And the good news there is we have over 500 students across the NSHE system who've actually taken the time to apply to one of our institutions for the program. So for that, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle Donato. Danielle is our NSHE Senior Learning Concierge. and she comes to us from UNLV, where she had worked for the past 9 years in various advising roles. And so the other thing I would point out is you do have the materials on this that we're going to go over next on the numbers. They were posted just the other day as supplemental materials and are available on the website as well for anyone in the public wanting to take a look. So with that, please welcome Danielle Donato.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chancellor, Board of Regents, Presidents. Thank you for having me. This has definitely been a very exciting project to work on. Working with the MGM COP employees, they've been very enthusiastic and grateful to have this opportunity to pursue their degrees free from MGM. So with that said, I received the information from all the institutions in terms of the applicants. So we had a total of 511 applicants. 83% of the applicants are pursuing undergraduate degree programs consisting of bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees, and certificate programs. And in terms of in-state versus out-of-state residency, 75% of those applicants are in-state and then 25% are out-of-state. Now to go on to the breakdown within the institutions, the College of Southern Nevada had a total of 223 applicants, with 204 of the applicants are interested in pursuing associate degrees, and 90% of those applicants are in-state and 10% are out-of-state. Great Basin College had a total of 97 applicants, with 54 of those applicants interested in the bachelor's degree programs. And in terms of residency, out-of-state is 59% and in-state is 41%. Truckee Meadows Community College, we had a total of 30 applicants, most of them interested in associate degree programs, with 50% in-state and 50% out-of-state. UNLV had a total of 133 applicants, a mixed, close bachelor's degree program, 68 applicants, master degree programs, 65, and then in terms of the residency, 84% were from in-state and then 16% out-of-state. UNR, total of 21 applicants, and then obviously master degree programs, and then in terms of residency, we had an in-state of 62% and out-of-state 38%. And then finally, Western Nevada College, we had a total of 7 applicants, majority of them interested in certificate programs, and then in terms of residency, out-of-state 57%, and then in-state 43%. So now going back to the communication with students. So we received the data from MGM the week of April 22nd. So that's when the MGM point of contacts and myself started really working with the students. And as you can see with the correspondence with the students, it's mostly email, but as we progress through each week, the communication increased significantly. So we were working very hard to meet that May 15th deadline to get everyone everyone to apply to the institutions. Now, in terms of the communication with students, these are the general topics that myself and the other MGM point of contacts were discussing with the MGM COP employees. So in terms of application procedures, how to apply, how to even start. So that was a lot of the conversation that the point of contacts had with the students. In terms of FAFSA and financial aid, what do they need to do to complete the FAFSA? And then what also other scholarship opportunities they're eligible for in addition to the MGM COP program. In terms of transfer credits and course evaluation, we had a lot of the employees that have already either taken classes at post-secondary educations or were currently enrolled in other institutions. So really assisting them and making it a smooth process for them to go ahead and have their credits transferred and their course evaluated. So whatever online eligible degree program they decided to pursue, it was going to be an easy transition and making sure they're not repeating courses or being redundant in what they're doing. Now, in terms of degree and program selection, this was really my piece working with the undecided student population, is really figuring out what degree program was going to be a best fit for their promotional goals, career goals, and academic goals. So this was a really exciting piece for me to work with them and figuring out a degree program that was going to be best for them as they were working for MGM. And then in terms of registration and course selection and program requirements, a lot of the employees had questions on how many courses that they should pursue. If it was an employee who has been out of school for 10 years or more, or never even went to college, we encouraged them to stick with 6 credits so they had a work and life balance. We didn't want them to feel overwhelmed. We didn't want them to, this project or this program to affect their work. So we encouraged them to enroll in 6 classes and really explaining to them what the program requirements are, GPA requirements, and everything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Nate McKinnon for the record. So just to close out this presentation, our next steps, right now we're trying to get students to enroll. They've applied to our institutions and we need them to enroll. And so our single points of contact, learning concierges across the system with Danielle as quarterback are outreaching to students to get them to enroll. We are also currently drafting and finalizing the program agreement and contract with MGM that just puts into writing all of the small pieces of this, including the fee schedule if approved by the board today. The billing procedures are also being finalized through our working group, and the employee data, we're looking to have that become an automatic weekly transfer. There's been some IT hiccups from the MGM NSHE interface and that we're still working through. And we also are looking on how we share the data that we get for the final eligibility of students each semester. Then we immediately will start looking at the spring 2020 application, which will be due by October 15th, if not sooner. That's a date we're still working on with MGM of when they want students who want to participate in the spring to apply for eligibility, if that will be their first time joining the program. We also are looking to bring on additional online programs designed to meet the MGM workforce needs. This has been a point that the Chancellor has continually made, which is MGM's our largest employer in the state. We should be able to know what they need and their employees need to be able to meet their needs. And so we're having conversations with MGM and looking to work with them. One of the interesting things I think we saw this year was tremendous interest in the executive MBA program at UNR, but there's very limited seats in that competitive program. And so we want to continue to look at how we grow online degree programs to meet the needs not just of MGM, but all of our employers. And looking at doing outreach and admissions events hosted by MGM moving forward, something we didn't really have time for in earnest this year, but we want to be able to do in the future. And the last thing I'd mention is a decision tree model for MGM employees, where instead of starting by choosing an institution and then a degree program, we'll ask them what their current level of education is, what type of degree they're seeking, what area they're looking to go into, and then list all of the degrees in that area regardless of institution, acting as a single system, being able to meet the needs of those employees. So those are, the last thing I would mention is just, we have a fantastic team of folks from across all of the institutions who are meeting very regularly to try and make this work. SCS has been a great partner in it, and we've just really appreciated all of the help from everyone to make this come together. We're really excited about our first semester of students, and with that, I'll entertain any questions, and just point out that we are asking approval today of the fee schedule, which is BOR 21-B, Appendix A.
Regent, yes, sir.
Vice Chair, if I could just add one thing. The target for MGM was about 500 employees. So we actually met that. So that was, for the first year of operation, they were trying to balance between, how we roll this out in a very short period of time. So we're real pleased that we actually met that first deadline. And as Vice Chancellor McKinnon had mentioned, this will also give us the opportunity now for our institutions to actually go and present in person to the employees or online. For example, GBC, that talks about all the online programs they have that the employees aren't familiar with. So the team has been incredible. Nate, all the presidents, Michael Flores, who worked on pulling this together with MGM. I think it was a great effort, and it's only going to get better moving forward.
Thank you. Regent Hayes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nate kind of touched on one of my questions at the end of working with MGM to find out if there were other programs. But one thing I wanted to know is, do we have any data or any information on the group that initially signed up to 1,200 and why they didn't finally sign up? And just finally, I'd love to hear from any of the campuses if they have any feedback on how this has been for them and what they're doing to address online courses to add more?
Thank you, Regent Hayes. Nate McKinnon for the record, Mr. Chairman, through you to Regent Hayes. The answer is we do not have particular data on why a student might have initially raised their hand as interested and then not continued. I'd point out that the initial eligibility verification was a very simple form in Workday that just said put in your information and request verification of eligibility to be able to participate in this program. That's on the MGM Workday product, not the NSHE Workday product. And then in order to continue, you would have had to complete a FAFSA and applied for admission to your institution. And so that, is a much more serious step a student would have to take. But we don't have any actual collection on the data as we're, at this point in time as to why a student might not have continued. But as the Chancellor said, we're very pleased with the number 500 and hope to see it grow over the coming years. Was there a second?
Do the presidents want to weigh in on that? President Miana.
It's the first time we do this, so we're learning, but I think it's going really well. We have an associate vice provost for workforce development that oversees the MGM COP at UNLV, and also another professional staff that serves as the UNLV Learning Concierge. We currently have 6 undergraduate programs and 3 graduate programs online that the students have enrolled in. Or applied to, I'm not sure where applied to, I think at this point. Our most, not surprisingly, our most popular one is the Executive Masters of Hospitality Administration. We are looking to add more online programs, in particular the Executive MBA Online, which UNLV does not have, and which the Dean is currently working on a plan and timeline for development to present to me in the next few weeks.
President Helens?
I think initially, when things are rolled out to employees, they tend to think of place. They're place-bound. And so if you're in a location like Las Vegas, you think Las Vegas. And I think that since it was rolled out to everyone in MGM, those who are out of state they didn't have that vision. So they were thinking, I just need to take something, it's online. And so I think that's really how GBC picked up the 97, which we deeply appreciate, of course. And I think we can easily accommodate that and more. And most of the interest is in the baccalaureate in our business management program, which also makes sense. And it just so happens, that program is excellent. So we look forward to serving those MGM students.
Sorry, President Zaragoza?
Yeah, at the Colleges of the Nevada, we've also designated a full-time equivalency that's kind of working with the MGM cohorts. One of the challenges that we had is that MGM actually had some layoffs, and so that impacted the number of students that we had in the pipeline. So we're trying to backtrack to see what kind of other options we can make available for these individuals. We're also supplementing the the onboarding process with advising wherever we can to make sure that, especially if they're being laid off, that there might be some other community resources or even CSN resources that could be made available. So again, we're connecting kind of the support systems as well, wherever possible.
Thank you. Regent Trachok and then Regent Lieberman.
I have a couple questions. Thank you. Do the students that enroll in these classes count towards our weighted student credit hour for each of the institutions?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman, through you to Regent Trachok. The answer is if they are in-state students, they do. If they are out-of-state students, they do not.
And so then for the out-of-state students, we rely solely on the fee that is charged for that course. And so there would be a net cost to each institution, as I understand it?
Thank you, Nate McKinnon, for the record. I can't speak to the net cost of the institution, and I don't know if any of the business officers or CFO Klinger would want to address that. But the answer is that the fee schedule waives out-of-state tuition, and that they are not counted towards weighted student credit hours. So that does, then leave a lower amount for the institution for, in particular, an out-of-state student versus an in-state student in this program.
I think it'd be important for all of us to understand what the net cost per institution is for all of the students in-state and out of state that enrolls in the program. I think it's important for all of us to understand what the cost to the system and to each of the colleges and universities will be. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you.
Regent Lieberman.
I commend the potential of this program, and I think it'll be greater once we work out the kinks. I would like to make a motion to approve the items that are needed today, and then I have a question after that passes.
I have a motion for approval of the MGM College Opportunity Program fee schedule from Regent Lieberman. Is there a second? Second from Regent Carter. Regent Lieberman.
Let's go through this, and then I have another question. Nothing on the motion itself.
I do have a question on the motion, and I was looking at the fee schedule we originally approved in September, and then we got the update in December, and it appears that the fees are slightly different. And I'm just curious how that evolved, or did I just misread that?
Sure. Nate McKinnon for the record. So I will do my best to answer that, but I'd look to my colleague, CFO Klinger, to be able to provide more context as he worked on this particular piece. But the MOU had some for example fees listed as a non-binding MOU, and that there was a decision that we have to be able to actually itemize all of the fees, as it was rather general in the way it was drafted at the time. So CFO Klinger and the budget officers, the business officers from the institutions worked together to put this precise fee schedule together that pointed out what fees we're talking about when we say that fees will be discounted. I don't know if CFO Klinger has anything he wants to add on that.
Yes, please.
Chair Geddes, I apologize. I missed the question. I'm trying to multitask here.
I like multitasking. I was just looking back at the fee schedule in the MOU and then what we approved, or the report we got in December, and it appeared that some of the fees were different from what we got there, and I just may be off base, and I'm just curious if there were changes in some of those primary fees, not necessarily the registration fees below the line, or the additional fees below the line, but the registration fees.
Yeah, Chair Geddes, for the record, Andrew Klinger. The fees laid out in the MOU, there was some, they were a little bit ambiguous, and so sat down with a subcommittee of folks from the various institutions to go through the fee schedule and identify the fees that could be discounted, because in some cases they have fees that support self-supporting programs and they didn't want to discount them. So the fee schedule that we came up with was the ones that they felt that were appropriate to discount for this specific program.
Thank you. And then we've got 2 years here in this specific request. We did approve our guaranteed pricing program going forward. So we would be extending this to that program, or we're seeing how it's going first, and then we'll have the full 4 or 5 years of cost.
Yeah, thank you, Nate McKinnon, for the record. The interaction between this and the guaranteed pricing program is not something we had particularly discussed as part of this. As MGM picks up the remaining costs for the individual students, we wanted to put this out for 2 years to coincide with the tuition that had been set by the board for 2 years, as well as an opportunity, that's also what the contract with MGM is for, an opportunity to revisit and see how it's going after that period.
Thank you. Regent Trachuk.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a concern here. The 25% of these applicants are out-of-state applicants, and it's the in-state applicants and the system itself that is subsidizing these 25% out of state since they don't count for the weighted student credit hours. It would be important for me to be able to vote on this fee schedule to understand, is there a net cost to the institutions? And if there is a net cost, what is that? But to vote on it without that information, I don't think, I can't do it. I need to know what it's going to cost, especially when we've seen where we're going now with state support for higher education. Thank you.
We do have a motion for approval of the fee schedule and a second. Any other comments or questions? All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Let's do a roll call vote, please.
Regent McMichael.
Aye.
Regent Moran is absent. Chair Page is absent. Regent Perkins. Regent Trachuk.
No.
Regent Carter.
Yes.
Regent Carvalho.
No.
Regent Del Carlo.
No.
Regent Dubrava.
No.
Vice Chair Geddes.
Aye.
Regent Hayes.
Aye.
Regent Lieberman.
Aye.
Regent McAdoo.
No.
Chair Page, I had marked you as absent on this motion.
Can you repeat the motion?
Of course, this is the motion to approve the fee schedule. I think it's important, Regent Trachuk raised the concern that he needed to know the cost for the out-of-state student subsidies to the institutions before he'd be willing to vote on that in the affirmative.
Just with the clarification, if we don't vote on it today?
Well, we are voting. It's
No, I'm saying if it doesn't pass today, what's the impact if we wait for that information to come back?
I would have to defer to Vice Chancellor McKinnon on that.
Thank you, Nate McKinnon, for the record. I think if this is not approved today, I'm not sure how we'd move forward with the program into the fall semester. Our intent with this was the board approved the MOU that outlined these exact parameters, and so we constructed a fee schedule that met those parameters already approved by the board. And so I'm not sure with our partners MGM how we'd move forward without approval.
But, Mr. Chairman, it's important for us to know what the cost is going to be. How do we vote on something if we don't know what the net cost is going to be to the institutions? I think it was incumbent upon the Chancellor's office to bring this back to us at the time we're voting on this. How do we vote on something when we don't know what it costs?
I know this is a little tricky, and I see Regent Del Carlo's hand, but we are in the middle of a vote. And so I would just point out to you that as we stand right now, and you are the last vote, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, and the rest are no's. So even if you vote yes, it will not pass. So I'm just pointing that out, because if you had been sitting here, you would have been counting that.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay, so the motion fails.
Okay.
So, Regent Del Carlo, then Regent Lieberman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Geddes. Since we're having a special meeting, couldn't we have this information for our special meeting next Friday? I don't know if the notice is the amount of time, but I totally agree with Regent Trachuk. We need to know what that cost is for out-of-state students. We're not getting weighted student credit hour. We just got beat up. Well, I won't take that off the record. I mean, the legislature didn't go as well as we wanted. We got beat up, thank you. You're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly, right? So I think it's really important that we know that. I mean, it's really nice to see that we're gonna have an increased enrollment, but at what cost?
Regent Lieberman.
Question for the Chancellor. Notwithstanding the questions regarding today's vote, have any other corporations stepped forward as part of this discussion and said that they are interested in following a model similar to the MGM?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Regent Page.
Well, it wouldn't be reasonable to have it on the agenda for next Friday, right? We have to have the agenda posted on Monday. But maybe, and again, depends on the Chancellor and his staff, could you guys have something back for the July special meeting? And would that still give us enough time not to affect the program?
Let me refer to CFO Klinger. When is the deadline? I mean, we've had this program for a year, and we've had all the employees to sign up. If we're telling them at this point the board is not approving moving forward, I find that problematic, given that we've discussed a percent of those being out of state, being offset by the increased number of weighted student credit hours. And let me give you a good example. One of the challenges GBC has faced has been enrollment. The 100 students, even if you take 75% of that comes into that, is going to benefit GPC greatly. So even the not paying the out-of-state credit costs for the out-of-state students, this program far outweighs from a financial standpoint of adding weighted student credit hours here. We can get that information. My concern is, and I have absolutely no problem providing that information. We weren't requested that before, but we will absolutely get it. But here's the concern, is that we've implemented this program in good faith for a year, and to not be able to move forward, I find very problematic.
Mr. Chairman, nobody who voted on this matter is concerned about the benefits of the program. We're simply asking for what it's going to cost us before we go forward. And I think it's irresponsible for us not to understand and to have the costs, the net costs, on any program before we can vote on it.
Regent Carter?
I guess from my perspective, how are we going to know the actual cost if we don't know how many people are actually going to enroll into the program?
And if I could add too, this was always designated as a pilot program that we always talked about coming back to the board about how it was implemented. That's why the board put a 2-year limit on it when we discussed this originally. So we fully discussed the percent of employees out of state versus in state, the benefits of that was all discussed. And we did a limit of 2 years in the pilot program to report back. I mean, the point is we are in flux. I mean, we don't know at this point how many actually sign up to the program.
Regent McAdoo, then President Miana.
Yes, for the record, I want to make it clear that I'm not opposed to the program. It's the same question, the cost associated, and I haven't heard any presidents chime in on how that has a financial impact on your institution. I mean, I think we've looked at it from a lens of it being a positive financial impact, but I think Regent Trachuk certainly pointed out a piece that could make it not a positive impact for you. So of course that's of concern to me. But on the other side of the coin, I realize that we made a commitment, and so what can we do to come up with a solution to this that will fall within the time frame? I get the open meeting law agenda and that it's not going to be easy to get that on Friday's agenda, but I believe that we need to be able to come up with a solution that could work so that we could live with the decision that we're making. Thank you.
President Miana.
Marta Miana, for the record, clearly all institutions are invested in this being a business model that doesn't come out on the losing end for us. If I could ask your permission to have a senior Vice Provost Heavey talk to this for a second. He's been intimately involved in looking at this, and if you would allow him to speak to this issue, I would appreciate it.
Yes, please.
Thanks. Chris Heavey for the record, Senior Vice Provost at UNLV. And as President Miana said, I've been very actively involved in the implementation of this program at UNLV and at the system level as well. And what I would say to this cost issue is that really it's an incremental cost. And so from my vantage point, there is always this fundamental issue of how we handle out-of-state students. But in this instance, the cost of those additional students to the institutions is negligible, actually, because the issue is standing up the programs. And so we put a lot of resources into creating these programs, but then adding on a few more students into a class that's already being offered is essentially almost no cost to us at all. And so there's really a net benefit to include those out-of-state students. Even though at some foundational level there is some subsidy of it, it's not a loss to the institution. It'd still be a gain. And so, and from the point of view of the implementation, it would be problematic for us as the institutions to not have this fee schedule approved because we're working on the billing processes to bill MGM for these programs. And so it's definitely the certainty that's created by Andrew Klinger's fee schedule has been something that we've all worked hard on to get that, and we all understand what those costs will be at the institution level in terms of what the revenue that would be generated from these students. And so we will not suffer a harm by moving forward with this at the time. It's something that we can evaluate further down the road at 2 years after we've had this trial period. But I think this program is a big win for the institutions in terms of having us all grow our enrollments in our online programs and helping us make these programs more robust. And really, sort of one of the lessons we learned from the visit of ASU recently is by making these programs larger, the incremental costs just continue to go down. And so by growing the enrollment of these programs with this MGM agreement, we're all, I think, coming out well ahead.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps we should have each of the presidents tell us whether or not, on the record, whether or not this is going to be a net cost to them. At least then we're going to have some information, which we don't have now, on whether or not this is going to cost our institutions, which doesn't alleviate my concern that it wasn't brought forward to us today. But if all of the presidents of those institutions that are involved can represent on the record that there will be no net cost to them from this program, then perhaps the board could reconsider the motion.
I guess I would say that it's hard to know exactly how that's going to pencil out at the moment, but indications are that it won't be a net cost, but I think we should leave this MOU sufficiently open so that if 2 years from now we decide that it doesn't pencil out and that we're coming out at a loss, that we can revisit. But I really do think that the other examples of where this has been done shows that it's worth trying.
President Zaragoza.
I would only build on that while we don't have the specifics at CSN, 85% of the students will be local. So I think that would neglect any additional cost on the other side.
President Helens.
So obviously, we are in favor of the initiative and happy to serve all students. It's a little early for us, as President Miata had said, we're just getting those enrollment numbers and we're just finding out who's in state and who's out of state. Just currently, approximately 60% of that 97 are out of state. So I do know there are no non-resident fees, no weighted student credit hour, and reduced registration fees, but I do not know right now what that pencils out to. Obviously, the more students we have, the better it is. Depends on what programs. If you have to start another section, that's all different, but it's very early to find that out. We could come back with some estimates, but right now we're still looking at the numbers because just recently it went from 87, as you saw in Vice Chancellor McKinnon's slide, it went to 97. So we could come back with that. But there are knowns, obviously, but we just found out that approximately 60% are out of state for us.
I would like to weigh in. Those are the three institutions with the most enrollees and the most to gain or benefit or lose. But I think we did make a commitment on the MOU. I think we do need to move the program forward. I think we need to approve the fee schedule as the business officers worked out, and we can get that report back at the next meeting and look at it. It is a pilot. We are trying something. It may be a net negative, at which point we would terminate the program as a pilot, but we've committed to pilot it and see how it goes. And I think the board really needs to reconsider the previous action and approve this fee schedule today so we can move it forward today and see how the pilot works. And we heard from the three presidents most impacted that they want it to go forward. So in order to do so, we need somebody who voted no for a motion to reconsider the previous motion. And I have that from Regent McAdoo. Is there a second from Regent Carvalho? So we have a motion to reconsider.
Okay, so there's a motion to reconsider. Is there a comment or anything before we vote? Okay, this one will start with Regent Moran, who's not here, so we'll start with Chair Page.
Yes.
Regent Perkins.
Yes.
Regent Trachuk.
This is to reconsider the item only.
This is to reconsider only.
Yes.
Regent Carter. Regent Carvalho. Regent Del Carlo. Regent Dubrava. Vice Chair Geddes.
Yes.
Regent Hayes.
Yes.
Regent Lieberman.
Yes.
Regent McAdoo. Regent McMichael.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passes unanimously.
So we can
Now
entertain
someone can make
a motion to approve the fee schedule as presented. Motion from Regent Lieberman,
So moved.
second from Regent McAdoo. And Regent Page?
I would ask that with the understanding that we bring back those costs, not at a future date, but sooner or later that they come back.
Do you want that as part of the motion, or you just want that as a comment?
Part of the motion.
Okay, okay.
Is that all right with Regent Lieberman and McAdoo?
Accepted.
Let's go back to me.
Regent Trachuk?
I think it's important for every future item that comes before this board that we understand what the costs are. It was inappropriate that we didn't have that in front of us together with the fee schedule. But I will support the motion here, as I understand that it's going to cause problems for the two largest of the institutions that are affected by this.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Regent Perkins? Regent Trachuk? Regent Carter? Regent Carvalho? Regent Del Carlo? Regent Dubrava? Vice Chair Geddes?
Aye.
Regent Hayes?
Aye.
Regent Lieberman?
Yes.
Regent McAdoo? Regent McMichael?
Yes.
Regent Moran is absent. Chair Page?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. With that, we will close item number 21. We'll take a 8-minute recess and reconvene at 10:05.
Yep. Call the meeting back to order. And we're going to go, before we go to item, on NV Energy, we're going to go to Professor Unger.
I would just like to announce that incoming Senate chairs have elected Dr. Brian Frost from University of Nevada, Reno as the next chair of the Council of Senate Chairs in the Nevada System of Higher Education, and Dr. Frost.
Great, thanks. I look forward to working with you all over next year. Thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
Welcome, look forward to working with you. With that, we are going to go to item number 26, NG Energy Policy, exit a new contract with NV Energy, General Counsel Reynolds. Actually, we're going to go to Z, so.
In Chairman Page, if I may, on the record, this is General Counsel Joe Reynolds, that I will be recusing myself from public discussion of this matter due to my former role as Chairman of the Public Utilities Commission. Thank you.
Chair Page, members of the Board of Regents, that does happen to me all the time. I get confused for Jill.
I can see how.
So I'm here to present on the energy policy of NSHE. As you can see from the briefing paper, our policy on sustainability and energy is outlined in the handbook, and it says we have a commitment to protecting the environment and reducing the system's dependence on non-renewable energy sources. And so I'm here to set forth some of the options that help the board further that policy and to make some recommendations about which option that I think is the best, that we think is the best for the system. And I'll be as brief as I can because we do have senior leadership from NV Energy, including Executive Vice President Tony Sanchez, here to present the bulk of this presentation, so I'll be as brief as I can. So as you all know, we are broken down into two power companies in this state. In the north, Sierra Pacific Power. In the south, Nevada Power. And I just wanted to give you some examples of kind of what kind of energy that we use. This is from 2018, these stats. I won't bore you with how I came up with these statistics. It was long and hard work, but we found them. And so the kilowatt hours are high. If you go to the south, they're at 114 million kilowatt hours per year. Now, this goes into sort of how we applied for the energy program I'll be discussing in a second. It has been brought up at prior board meetings about how we are going to, what the relationship is going to be with NV Energy moving forward. It was brought up, I think, a couple board meetings ago about 704B. So Chapter 704B in the NRS lets large commercial institutions or large educational institutions leave the grid if they wanted to seek renewable energy sources from outside of the state. And so there's a whole process outlined in 704B, which I'll talk about, but here are basically the two options. Do a 704B petition, leave the grid, go out into the open market and seek energy, or follow this OPPR. It's a new program that's been presented by NV Energy. It's called the Nevada Optional Pricing Program Rate, and it basically fixes your base energy tariff rate, gives you predictability on costs for a long period of time, and the key here is the energy you receive through the OPPR is 100% renewable. The NV Energy company invested in 6 giant solar projects that create about 1 million megawatts of energy a year. That's a lot. That's a lot of energy. And so those are the two options. I mean, there's 3 options really. Keep the status quo. But the status quo does not further our commitment to renewable sources of energy and the values that projects to our students and our populace about our commitment to protecting the environment. So what is 704B? Well, some call it an exit application. The first was filed by a mining company years ago. And the reason they did it then was to get off the grid because the grid was being stressed. There wasn't a lot of energy to go around, and NV Energy needed a way to save energy to provide energy to the rest of their customers. And so a large mining company left. They left the grid, built their own power plant, Tracy, Nevada. In recent years, 704B now has been used by large commercial entities and large governmental institutions to obtain renewable sources of electricity, although that wasn't the intent of that bill. So there's a lot of different hoops you have to jump through to comply with 704B. One, you have to be an eligible customer, has a few criteria there, so common budget, common control, and an average annual load of 1 megawatt or more. Now this has actually been changed by Senate Bill 547, which just passed last week. Now the requirement is that you have to use 10 megawatts of energy per year. Part of the consideration of a 704B application is the importance of the public interest. Previously, prior to SB 547 passing, a company leaving the grid had to show that leaving the grid would not be contrary to the public interest. Well, now the burden is on the agency to prove that that leaving the grid is affirmatively in the public interest. It's a different consideration. It's much harder to prove. This bill, Senate Bill 547, has definitely tightened the grip of 704B, and it's made it much harder for large entities to leave this grid. So a couple examples here. This is just illustrative of which entities have filed 704B applications in the past. This has already changed, actually. This is a very fluid topic, but this is just illustrative. For example, the MSG Sphere may be withdrawing their application. The Las Vegas Stadium Events is withdrawing their application. There's been public reporting about this. Station Casinos, I believe, is withdrawing their application. part of the reason why is that the exit fees are so substantial. To leave the grid, PUC has determined that certain entities have to pay a certain amount of money. So, for example, MGM had to pay $87 million. That was the price tag to leave the grid. Caesars, $48 million. So that would be a cost if we decided as an institution, as a system, to leave. We would have to pay an exit fee. So things to consider, of course, 704B is a petition before the PUC. It's a proceeding, and so it involves litigation. It would be costly and time-consuming. In fact, we would probably have to hire an additional person to do this on a full-time basis to do this litigation and comply with the 704B process that's been amended by Senate Bill 547. Of course, you'd have to pay an impact fee, which would be in the multi-millions. And of course, if we left the grid, we would be subject to the open market, which can be volatile and have different economic pressures than a stable market that we have here in the state. So that's basically my presentation. I encourage the board, that's part of what I'm doing here, is encouraging the board to allow us as a system to enter contract negotiations with NV Energy for the OPPR program. This is not a request to sign the contract, to finalize the contract. It's to enter the negotiations, to discuss the terms of them. We would definitely come back to the board once those terms have been finalized to seek approval to actually enter that contract. It's important to note the OPPR does not go into effect until 2022, so we have plenty of time to negotiate the terms. Thank you very much. I will now turn it over to Executive Vice President Tony Sanchez if you don't have any questions for me.
Regent Trachuk.
I do have a question of Mr. Gould. One of my clients that I do work both in permitting for and also on putting together the financing is First Solar that has a few hundred megawatts that have been installed and are producing power now in southern Nevada. And so I don't know that I'm even able to be involved in the discussion since we're just focused on the OPPR option at this time.
Do you believe that your representation of this solar company has any impact on your ability to make an independent decision on this matter? And if you have any concerns, then I would encourage you to then recuse yourself. But
my personal belief that we need to go with non-fossil fuels would override any of those concerns.
Well, that I can't help you with.
But I just want to make sure that with that disclosure, am I allowed to be involved in this discussion and in this vote?
Then let me, in the spirit of lawyers, let me ask you this question.
I think a bill's coming.
Will this affect a significant pecuniary interest of yours?
No.
Then I think the disclosure should be adequate.
Thank you.
No questions? Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to Executive Vice President at NV Energy, Tony Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chancellor, Board of Regents. For the record, Tony Sanchez, Executive Vice President of Business Development and External Affairs with NV Energy. I have with me today our Vice President of Customer Operations, Michelle Follett, who has an intricate knowledge of each of the offerings that we've been making as part of what's been referred to as the OPPR program throughout the state.
Mr. Sanchez, and also just want to welcome you, but also say you're also one of our newest distinguished Nevadans. So
that was a great honor.
You weren't there for our luncheon, so we want to just say congratulations while you're here. So
no, I appreciate that, and it was a great honor for both me and my family, and a testament that having been born here in Nevada, and the dedication that myself as well as our company has to higher education. It was very much appreciated, and thank you for that. You have before you a PowerPoint presentation. I know that time is limited. You've had this, we were required to turn this in about a month ago, so some of it certainly could be updated, and it's not my intent to go through each of these slides today. But suffice it to say, bottom line is NV Energy's goals and desire to serve our customer is in complete alignment with NSHE's mission of delivering higher education to Nevadans and others throughout our state. We share a 100% renewable goal. We share a desire to serve that energy in a reliable, long-term, price predictability, do it safely. We want to support local jobs. We want to do economic development for the state. But at the same time, with the realities of budgetary constraints and limitations and different priorities, we have to do it in a manner that reflects today's competitive marketplace, and as well as an acknowledgement by the state for those of you, probably everybody in this room that followed the Nevada legislative session, was one of the most transformative when it comes to energy policy that we've had over the last decade. And we were proud to participate in that, and certainly available to answer any questions with respect to what energy legislation was passed. Price and value objective, obviously, if you paid attention to the last election cycle, you probably saw a lot of these facts and figures in the context of the question 3 debate. We're very proud of where our rates are today. We're very proud that we haven't had a general rate increase to our rates since 2011. Currently today, 48% lower average than our neighbor to the west, California. 21% lower than the national average retail. So we can compete on a price per kilowatt basis with just about any utility, certainly in the West, if not throughout the country. But the bottom line is the rate we pay today is 15% lower than the rates that were paid in 2009. And we have made a commitment to the state to keep rates flat and declining for at least the next decade. And that's something I'll talk a little bit more about here shortly. This just gives a quick overview of some of the activity, some of the rate decreases that we've had over the last couple of years. Moving on, at the same time, the only fun part of my job outside, it's certainly not handling the company's political department, but it's the community relations that we do. We serve close to 90% of the state, and that is absolutely, with our foundation and the $6 to $7 million that we're able to give back to the community, not at customer expense. This comes at a corporate profit. That is something that we're very proud of doing. It's something that our 2,500 employees want us to do. We invest in the areas that our employees ask us to do. But the bottom line, the predominant recipients of that funding are K through 12, as well as post-secondary education, along with energy assistance to the most vulnerable Nevadans that we have. This is just a short example of some of the grants on a per institution basis. These are never 100% accurate. In fact, I know some programs we've done would even make that number a little bit higher, but we're continually listening to your member institutions, whether it's here at the University of Nevada, Reno and the engineering program, which we're a proud supporter of, or with proposals that we have similarly currently from UNLV for their engineering building, or CSN and Nevada State College with their health science building. It was a terrific session, I believe, for higher education when it came to a lot of your priorities, and we're always going to be partners in those. One of the benefits you get as remaining as a bundled customer is you get to participate in our energy efficiency offerings. You can see over the past 5-6 years, close to $1 million in energy efficiency opportunities. Folks that leave our system don't get to participate in those. But at the same time, as your infrastructure ages, new opportunities arise to help with whether it's HVAC systems, whether it's continual lighting advancements in technology, or making buildings communicate in a more cohesive fashion. That is something that you get as a benefit as remaining as a bundled customer. So when you're looking at the value proposition, you have to factor in the fully bundled customer opportunities as well. In the past, we've had what's referred to as the Nevada Green Rider 1.0. The OPPR program initially was called the Green NGR 2.0 for various reasons. In particular, listening to our utility commission, we rebranded that the optional pricing program. But Truckee Meadows has been a participant in this program. The city of Las Vegas, for example, is a participant in this program and became the first city of its size to be 100% green. And this is a bit different of a program. than the OPPR in that you're actually receiving the credits yourself to be able to certify that you're 100% green. That's a distinction with the OPPR program. The credits that are generated from your utilization of large-scale renewable projects will help us, the power company, meet the increased portfolio standard, which, as everybody probably knows, was just recently increased by the governor and the legislature to 50% by 2030. We also have a very proud partnership with INCHI with respect to sustainability and renewable energy projects. Literally dozens and dozens of projects throughout the state, whether at Nevada State College, CSN, certainly at UNLV and UNR. We originally used to fund the geothermal studies program here at UNR and the renewable energy minor at UNLV. Those really dovetail and meet similar goals on behalf of both companies. Here's a couple of, also on this slide, you can just see some of the investments that you've received as a fully bundled customer and the direct energy savings that have been proposed, that have been actually come to fruition, and how much renewable energy the system currently has. So the OPPR program, what is it? Understanding that we have a competitive environment and that we have to provide our customers with rate stability, we proposed this program initially to pancake off of the 1,000 megawatts of solar energy and battery storage that was approved by the Nevada Public Utility Commission last December. As an aside, we'll be making an announcement next week of an even larger investment in renewable energy, and that's something that we look forward to announcing literally in the next week as part of our integrated resource plan. So stay tuned for that. But suffice it to say, these are the resources that would be under construction. These would be new renewable, all largely solar, with the 1,000 megawatts that was approved in December. Half was for northern Nevada and half was for southern Nevada. 100 megawatts of battery storage, which is very important, especially in northern Nevada, where we have transmission constraints, and battery storage actually helps in a cost-efficient manner to meet those transmission constraints. But this is a program that we have started offering our customers, and if you've been reading the news, you've probably recently seen entities such as the Las Vegas Sands, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, Station Casinos earlier this week, the numerous programs, the Grand Sierra Resort, the Peppermill, the Atlantis here in the north are all proceeding to participate in this program, which, to be very clear, is a pending application in front of the Nevada Public Utility Commission. And that is something that we're processing right now. We know some issues have been raised with certain participants, namely staff of the Utility Commission and others, and we're going to work through those one way or the other. The proposal that and the approval that we're seeking, that we hope the Board of Regents will approve, is to allow us to engage in negotiations with your council over the details of these types of programs. What happens if it's not approved? What happens if it is approved? We take into account each of those, all designed to lower the carbon content and at the same time giving you pricing stability and rate decreases in effect. We can certainly answer any specific questions about the program, but with that, both Michelle and I would be available to answer any questions.
Regent Trachuk.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. The last slide on that presentation, if you could pull that back up, I just want to make sure that I understand there we go. Whoa.
There we go.
And also congratulations as a distinguished Nevadan, Tony.
Thank you.
Here we have Nevada Power based on 87 megawatt hours and Sierra Pacific based on 114. Should those two be reversed?
That is correct. Actually, that is, as I indicated, this was done a month ago, and so that was a technical.
Would the savings be even greater if you put the 114 megawatt hours up on the Nevada Power side, or are those calculations, do they remain the same?
That is correct, and those fresh numbers would come back to the board prior to any consideration that you'd have as.
But the savings would be greater. The savings would be greater then?
No.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Good morning. Michelle Follett for the record. The savings numbers are accurate. The
Okay.
top line is reversed. Apologize for the mistake.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Regent McAdoo?
Surprise my colleagues that I have a motion written out. I'd like to make a motion to authorize the Chancellor to negotiate a preliminary contract with MB Energy on the OPPR with the following conditions. One, that the final approval of any contract within MB Energy must come back to the full board and be from the board, signed off by the board chair. Two, options for the length of any negotiated contract be left open and come back to the board. And three, that the saving cost-sharing plan to be developed among all the NSHE institutions also be brought back to the board for final approval.
Second. Motion and second. Vice Chair Geddes.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. And I think you addressed the first one is the timing of the docket. I mean, it hasn't been settled on. I thought I read sometime in September is when everything has to be filed and then they'll rule on it.
Yes, Regent Geddes, we recently asked for a delay in the procedural schedule so we could take into account some of the comments that have been filed. So it is still on track to be submitted and decided by September, but that is subject to change.
Okay. And Regent Trey Chalk?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That's
That's
right.
good.
And I think it's very important, as Regent McAdoo pointed out there, that we do see a net gain in the north, a net increase in the north and a net decrease in the south based on where current rates are. And this is something that we would do as a system, as one system. If we didn't do this at one system, only 3 of our institutions would qualify because the others aren't big enough power users. So for us to be able to go green as a system, it's important that we do act as a system and, to Regent McAdoo's point, have that revenue sharing agreement so no institution is overly burdened by this. And it does meet our energy policy in going green. And as Regent Traychuk and Investment Committee have dealt with, the students have been coming to us for several years on fossil fuel divestiture. And this is a great step forward by getting us to 100% green energy. I fully support the negotiations and our staff working with NV Energy and bringing something back to us for us to consider. Thank you.
Regent Traychuk.
I have I've been instructed to make a disclosure for the record, and then I have a question. One of my clients is is a developer of industrial solar power in the state of Nevada, First Solar, who's has built a couple hundred megawatts that are producing power in southern Nevada and is continuing to develop commercial solar power within the state of Nevada. I don't think that first of all, there would be no pecuniary interest to me voting yes or not, no on the matter, and I do not feel conflicted, so I will engage in the discussions and I will vote. And now I have a question. As a system, we would come in, and as a system, we would have a total savings of $381,000, but the costs allocated for each of these institutions would either be a net savings or an increased cost, as I understand it. Is my assumption correct there?
Well, I think the intent of the revenue sharing agreement is that we bundle the money and then distribute it back out proportionally so that everybody will see a net positive. Nobody will be at a net negative. But the largest user, like UNLV, would not be saving the full $494. They would be saving less than that as they help cover the negative costs so that no one would be negatively impacted.
So there would be no, for instance, with UNR or with Truckee Meadows, they wouldn't be seeing an increase in their power bills as a result of negotiating this as a system. Thank you.
And I would clarify that that was the point of my motion, to make sure that that was protected piece, if you will.
Regent Hayes? Yeah, then we'll go to the Brava.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a couple of disclosures. One, I once worked at a law firm with NV Energy CEO Doug Cannon. I think that ended in 2009 that we both worked there. And I also did legal work for NV Energy, I believe, in 2010. I have no current financial interest with NV Energy. And I guess I should also disclose that I have known Mr. Sanchez for more than 2 decades now, but have no financial interest in Mr. Sanchez. So I believe I'm free to vote on this as long as you're okay with it.
Thank you. Regent DeBrava.
Thank you, Chair Page, and thanks to the Chancellor for bringing this issue. I was kind of asking the questions because I saw just in the newspaper other entities that were filing for leaving Nevada Energy. You know, with the potential savings that we've identified, how do we know what the potential savings would be if we went ahead and filed for a 704B petition to exit? How much, one, could we still qualify with the recent change in the legislature just made? And two, how much more work, homework would we have to do to kind of get an idea what our exit fee might be to weigh the pros and the cons before we all commit to the OPPR to be negotiated?
Regent Trachuk?
If I might address that, my concern would be if we were going to go the 704B route, is the exit fee could be significant based on our size. The cost for the litigation could be significant, but more importantly, and I say this having done Nevada Power and Sierra Pacific Power Company's resource planning cases and rate cases from 2006 to 2014 before the Public Utilities Commission. The biggest concern and the biggest problem we had for Nevada ratepayers is when we deregulated back in 1999, and then the energy markets went crazy, and all of a sudden, instead of paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour, we're paying 40, 50 cents a kilowatt hour. And so the problem, if we're buying it on the open market, when the market's low, that's wonderful. But when the market's high, that's not so wonderful. And the good thing, as I see personally, of the proposal that's before us, then we're locked into the race with the utility. And the utility has been a very reliable partner for Nevada for decades, quite frankly.
Chair Page, if I may.
Sure, and then we'll go to Vice Chair Geddes.
And I appreciate Regent Trachuk's comments, and I knew he had a background in this and would be able to elucidate this information, so thank you to Regent Trachuk.
Vice Chair Geddes.
And Regent DeBrava, to the point, the costs aren't known yet, and they would be higher than what we've previously seen on the 704B exit because of SB 547 and the criteria. We don't know the final result because they'll have to go through rulemaking based on the new law, but the criteria they put in 547 will make it harder and more expensive. So I follow Regent Trachuk and follow these issues, and that's why I recommend we pursue this and see if it actually works for us. I did have one minor question for Mr. Sanchez, and I was just looking at the recent filings, and it said there was going to be a rate decrease in the north and a rate increase in the south, minimal ones, but as we go through the negotiations, it would be whatever that price is once we get to the contract, not today's price, correct?
Correct, and to clarify for the record as well, anything that our company and your council negotiates, that's going to be contingent on going through the utility commission process, and then you make a decision at that point whether you're going to execute and go forward. So there'll be a lot of variables. One important factor I also forgot to mention is also with Southern Nevada customers, because I know there's a sensitivity to how that would be apportioned. We also, as hopefully folks saw on Monday, we announced a $5 million rate decrease here in the north, and then correspondingly next June, we have committed to filing at a minimum of $120 million rate decrease for the south. And now that is another additional pancaking decrease, for example. So that is something that meets with our long-term goals of lowering rates, but that is something that's going to be substantial savings for all of your Southern Nevada member entities as well.
Thank you. Okay, Regent Carlo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez, thank you for your renewable energy leadership. While I greatly appreciate all that NV Energy and you have done personally for higher education in Nevada, I would like to state that philanthropy cannot be taken into my consideration of this agenda item. Thank you.
Great. Okay, with that, we have a motion and a second. Can we do a roll call vote, please?
Okay, Regent Trachuk.
Aye.
Regent Carter. Regent Carvalho. Regent Del Carlo. Regent Dubrava. Vice Chair Geddes. Regent Hayes.
Aye.
Regent Lieberman.
Yes.
Regent McAdoo.
Yes.
Regent McMichael.
Yes.
Regent Moran is absent. Chair Page.
Yes.
Regent Perkins.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chancellor.
Thank you.
Board of Regents, appreciate it.
Okay, with that, we're going to go to item number 22, admissions criteria, Nevada State College. President Patterson.
Thank you, Chair Page. It's an opportunity on this item to address the board about many of the changes and growth that are occurring at Nevada State College, which is all very positive for the most part, but there are some challenges, which I've disclosed to the board in the past. And so this is part of an agenda item to help the Nevada State College more carefully manage enrollment and enrollment growth, and to better define or help students identify the institutions that they want to attend. So today, this will be taken in kind of a two-step process. Today, I'm going to outline the proposal and the reason for the proposal and how the proposal was developed, and then working with Vice Chancellor Abba and others, we'll come back to the board at a later meeting to actually approve a policy change if the board is so inclined. So the opportunity today is to really get your feedback on whether we're going the right direction and any questions you may have about it. Just a quick snapshot of the student population. As you know, very significant growth, 30% in the last 2 years in the credit hours taught, and population is just under 5,000. Very diverse. Our freshman classes come in 90% diverse as an institution. We've had a number of things that have helped us to, in the short run, manage that growth. We were able to acquire the Raker Student Success Center. We immediately grew into that building, and that's operating well. We are on pace to have residence halls open, likely in the fall of next year. We, of course, had the School of Education building and a partnership building with CSN approved by the legislature, and we anticipate the governor's signature on that CIP bill. That will be a very significant component of the college growing out. And again, just in the last fall, we had enrollment again overall go up 15%, and we're adding new degree programs. So a lot going on at the college at this particular point in time. So how do you create sustainable growth? 30% increase in students in the last 2 years is one thing, but the most astounding number and the most difficult number to manage is the 72% increase in freshmen that hit in the fall of 2017. So why is that difficult to manage under current admissions policy is that the way the board's admissions policies are designed for all of the institutions is that if you meet a certain minimum high school GPA, you're in. There technically isn't a way to say, no, we have too many students coming, we're denying admission. And so we will be the first institution in the state to come forward with a policy that actually says, no, we're not going to take every student that applies in if our capacity does not allow us to provide an adequate student experience. So what happens when you have that big of an increase in freshmen is you end up, how are you going to fill all of the additional sections, particularly of those gateway courses like English 101, Math 120, and make sure you have an adequate number of advisors and all of those things, because it's happening in real time. And you also have to remember that the funding formula is in arrears. So we don't actually get the resources to fund that student increase as a whole until a couple of years after we teach those students. And so it's just not a system that's designed for this level of increase, particularly in freshmen. It's much more manageable on a transfer population than an overall increase. The other points that we want to really emphasize is that when we started as a college in 2002, at a 2.0 GPA, the universities were at 2.5. So the gap in space between the state college and the universities was only a half a point. Subsequently, in 2008, the universities increased their admission standard to 3.0, and so we've been in a much larger space for students to come to the state college than we were at the time that the institution was founded in 2002. So part of this discussion about admissions changes has to do with really looking at the higher education system as a whole and looking at where students are coming into the system and helping guide students to the institution that is best suited to fulfill what they want out of higher education. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because we've come up with some really interesting data. So the other thing I wanted to show you is what's happening at the institution just from an academic preparation standpoint. So our average entering GPA has very steadily climbed. So we're getting lots more students above a 3.0, and that's pushing up that average entering GPA. So notwithstanding that, as was in the ARSA committee yesterday, with this large freshman class that we had come in, you were able to, you saw that there was actually a decline in our retention rate of that group, less credit hours completed. So there were factors from that big freshman class coming in, which we were very excited about, but we clearly were not prepared to immediately address that sizable of a class coming in. The other thing I wanted to mention, at the same time that we're increasing the overall GPA, we're growing incredibly more diverse. So in the last biennium compared to this biennium, we've gone up in terms of freshman African American students 107%, so more than doubled. We've gone up in Latino students, Latinas, we've gone up 102%. So again, more than doubled that population. On Asian students, we've gone up 44%. So notwithstanding that our average entering GPA has increased, we've become incredibly more diverse. Talking about students that are transfer students. So the significance of this slide is mostly from the standpoint of that while it shows that the percentage of transfer students as a whole is dropping in terms of prior CSN enrollment, the actual number is not dropping. It's just showing that we're becoming much more of a first-time freshman institution. Our transfer population continues to rise. But here's the really interesting statistic when we looked at this. I'm going to talk about graduation rates in just a bit. But the really interesting thing is that our biggest impact on graduation rates is that students transfer out of the institution and they go to another institution. That is our biggest single factor as to why our graduation rates are not higher. So the shocking thing that we discovered, because it wasn't what I expected the majority of students were going to UNLV to a degree program that we didn't have, or that they were local students just right in the area who were coming to the college more with an intent to transfer to the university at a later stage. But what we actually discovered is that twice as many students are transferring out of Nevada State College to CSN as are transferring to UNLV. So what's clearly happening at the college is that students are not selecting the right institution at the front end for what their degree pathways are. Now that could be a factor of cost, with CSN being a much lower cost. It could be a factor of geography, because a lot of students have transportation issues, and we're quite a ways from North Las Vegas and Northwest and Southwest. And so students could be deciding that in that first year or two that it's too far. And it could be also, again, that we don't have the degree pathways or certificates at the scale of which CSN and UNLV offer, which are a much broader array of degree programs and alternative pathways. So all things that we're taking into consideration. Now I want to talk about kind of what's happening on the student success side. So this slide is a little bit busy, but it has some really interesting numbers in it. The top two lines, the top two lines are really talking about what we're looking at in terms of retention rates. The middle line is kind of telling you more about our success of applications to enrollment. And then the bottom line is talking about the 6-year graduation rate. So it's always hard to talk about these numbers because they're much smaller classes back in fall of 2012, and we're a different institution now, but they're pretty eye-opening on graduation rates. So as you can see, that students that start with us below a 2.5, the graduation rate is 3.1%, which is really, obviously really low. And then you can see how that graduation rate scales up to 10.8 above a 2.5, to 23.1 above a 3.0, to 31.6 with above a 3.5. Again, recognizing that they're high transfer outs. So these are not students per se dropping out of school, but they're just potentially going someplace else. But still really low numbers. Same on the retention rates. You see a retention rate of only 41%, but scaling up to mid-70s on the 3.5 and up. Now let's do a snapshot of more current information. So here's the fall of 2017, and again, we're looking at that enrollment yield, and it tells you a lot of information in just this little bit of slide information. But again, it's showing that of the students that are applying below a 2.5, it has the lowest percentage of students that actually decide to go to the college compared to the students that are applying above a 3.5 and a 57% yield rate, which is quite high. And then again, as you look at the retention rates, you can see all of these rates have scaled up pretty dramatically among all populations, but a fairly low 47% rate. So we've tried and we've done better with all student populations if you look at the comparative data. But the numbers relative to the 2.5 and below are still very low. And that's something that we have to take in consideration of. Before I leave this slide, I also want to give you a scale of, again, how the institution is changing. So if you look at the 2012 class compared to this 2017 class, this is showing the application numbers, but I also have the actual enrollment numbers. And when you look at the difference in the classes in the 5-year period, that below 2.5 has gone up in numbers 172%. The population from a 2.5 to a 2.99 has gone up 111% in that 5 years in terms of comparison of freshmen from 12 to 17. But then when you start to look at the 3.0 and to 3.5, it's gone up 258% since 2012. And when you look at the above a 3.5, it's gone up 321%. So the bulk of the growth of the college is occurring above actually a 3.0. And so another interesting factor as you're looking at admissions policies and how we're trying to manage classrooms with this kind of differential. We did look at our comparable institutions in addition to looking at where UNLV and UNR are at, obviously locally. We looked at Middle Georgia State University, which is one of our peers, Rogers State, and City University of New York, Medgar Evers. All of those are, in general, although Middle Georgia State doesn't have a high school GPA, they rely more on test scores. You can see they're kind of calibrated at a 2.7 level. We also looked at our aspirational institutions, Cal State San Marcos and City University of New York, Brooklyn, and again, looking at a 2.5 or 2.7 in terms of admission. And Cal State San Marcos also has this idea of the completion of a college preparation program as a condition of admission, which we'll talk about as well. And then they've also got some test scores listed. So these are kind of some of the peer institutions that we looked at. So in addition to the student success piece of that, we've also talked about the college's growth in the way of space constraints. And again, that funding formula in terms of the way funds are allocated a couple years after you teach the students. Those are pretty significant factors in managing an admission policy. So we started work on this about a year ago in earnest. We went and had a number of community forums in different locations in Las Vegas. We did a town hall on campus. And then I created a campus task force that was chaired by Dr. Edith Fernandez. Dr. Abby Peters, our faculty senate chair, was on that task force and is here today. A number of faculty and staff from admissions and registrar's office, as well as the provost office, were involved in those discussions. And I asked them to make a recommendation to me on where we should go with an admissions policy. We also had discussions with the student council. Then we subsequently had discussions with high school student focus groups, and we did some high school counselor meetings to talk about the impact of that. And that was able to help us gather a lot of information and community input. By and large, the community input we received was positive, with the caveat that there's expression always of concern over who are we leaving out? And is there going to be a differential impact? And those are issues that we have to address in an admissions policy. So this is the proposal we came up with, and it is unique in terms of existing admissions policies, and I'll tell you how that is. In general, we're raising the freshman admission standard, or proposing to raise the admission standard to a 2.5 with corresponding test scores that are a few points below the university level for ACT and SAT. But then we have some very interesting components to that. One is that we're going to continue to review applications below a 2.5. So I really don't want to call this an alternative admissions. This is really going to be part of our core admissions process. And we're going to look for those factors that show indicia of success, where we see that the student is committed. Really, this needs to be more of a dialogue with the students about what are you trying to achieve with higher education. This is an opportunity for us to engage them more directly in, are you intent on getting a 4-year degree? Because when you think about our system and the input points that we have, the state college is a great place to go if you're intent on a 4-year degree in a degree pathway that we offer, and particularly for education and nursing and some of the other core degrees we offer, where there's clearly going to be a job waiting on the side. They might not be the most lucrative degrees, but they're very solid degrees. We offer a great value for that student. We're not a great place for students to go to explore what they want to do with higher education. CSN and our other 2-year colleges offer a lot more opportunities. They offer a lot more degree pathways, they offer certificates, they offer a much lower cost, and they now have the Promise Scholarship, which allows students to go free tuition as a last-in scholarship. So there are plenty of advantages for students who are trying to explore education to start at the 2-year college and then continue forward. So this will give us an opportunity to really dialogue with the students about why they want to come to Nevada State College. But the factors that we would look at for students in this category, they would include things like significant improvement in high school record in the last 2 years. Things like leadership responsibilities that they've taken on, significant work experience, significant military experience, major adversity that they've had to overcome. Those are the kinds of factors that we'll look at for identifying students that may have an explanation for a lower college or lower high school GPA coming into the college. But the other interesting component of this is we still want to create a floor, meaning we will still continue to offer admission to students above a 2.0 and below a 2.5. But as a condition of that admission, we're going to require enrollment in certain college success programs that we're developing. And so our intent is, and this is because of our strong emphasis on an access mission, our intent with this is not to abandon that access mission as best we can, but that not to take students that we don't have the programs for them to be successful. And this is an opportunity for us to really dialogue with them and create a program where they, if they come in, that they have shown that commitment and will provide that programming necessary for them to be successful. So those are interesting elements. And the last element that is unusual is for us to be able to limit admission based on degrees where there's high impact and there's more students coming in than we have the availability to teach. This will primarily impact us currently on our nursing program because we have such a high number of pre-nursing students come in and not enough slots for them to get into the program. And so those are kind of the things, though, that we're going to look at. It may not have a dramatic impact from year to year. That remains to be seen. It depends on the number of applications that come in. It depends on the number of students that want to enroll at the college. We intend to grow very aggressively. So this is not an intention, if the students want to come to Nevada State, not to open the doors. It's really to look at that 72% increase and see if there's ways that we can better define our classes coming in. So this was the change from one particular year. Now this is a snapshot, and again, sometimes the numbers are small, and so these percentages can change pretty dramatically, but these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to watch if the board approves the admissions change, that we're not having a differential impact on students from this. We're going to continue to enroll a high level of diverse student population, and we're going to continue to want to enroll in all racial categories. And so you can see, but though on this particular snapshot, that the impact from this examination would have fallen from a disproportionate standpoint on the African American student population, because 33% of the students that started during that full-time or part-time cohort were under a 2.5. Which would mean that those 13 students under this kind of policy would be considered for the other indicia of success and engagement in a student success program that was required as a condition of admission. So we are very aware of watching this kind of differential impact and looking at how we address that. So we talked a little bit about the CSN pathway option. What I really like about this consideration is that we have much more opportunity to build a seamless transfer, not just from articulation, but in terms of actually identifying students that want to come to the college at an earlier time and start to reach out to them, where we have co-advising, where we have activities and those kinds of things. This was done very well at Central Florida and Valencia College model, excuse me, where they started to really help the students identify as Nevada State College students at the same time as they may be starting at the College of Southern Nevada. And the key for that partnership to work is for us to really encourage them to get their two-year associate's degree before they transfer. Because right now students are transferring at all levels of credits. They may or may not have an associate's degree. So we're going to look at doing these things, and they fit very well in our Complete College America plans, and all of these things are designed to increase and strengthen the partnership with CSN. Excuse me. We do have alternatives. There are many more besides this. Obviously, if the state, the board, would commit to an ongoing capital project where we could keep growing like this, but I don't see that as very likely. But you know, the education building, if that's funded and completed, will be the first building, state-funded building in 13 years at the college. So obviously the state has not kept up with the current pace of growth at the college, and whether that could change in the future, that's an option. I'm not suggesting a change in the funding formula, but if there was more projection in the formula on enrollment growth, that would help us better manage classes coming in from year to year as opposed to waiting every biennium for an increase. You can manage by price. I mean, we are the lowest cost four-year institution in the state. So if we increase our price, we'll probably decrease our demand. Those are potential options. You know, there are other ways to deal with capital project issues. We could try to lease space away from campus. There's not any adjacent to campus. All of them come with various issues, and I've dialogued a bit about that before. So before we go to questions, I did want to, if pleasure of the board, but I would like to give an opportunity for our student council president, our vice president, Alexander Loom, to speak, and our faculty senate chair, Dr. Abby Peters, if they would like, before I take questions, if that's okay, Chair Page.
All right. Thank you, Chair Page, Board of Regents, and President Patterson. For the record, Alexander Lum, LUM. A majority of the Nevada State Student Alliance, which is our student government on Nevada State College's campus, supported the increase to the admission standards contingent upon the use of a holistic approach to a percentage of students beneath the 2.5 GPA. In that holistic approach, some of the things we discussed were home life, jobs, internships, and more variables under that kind of thing to allow them to be admitted to the college. One of our main concerns as a organization was the possibility of change to the diversity of the campus student population. Specifically, there was a projected decrease in the displayed statistics on the African American population, which we are not in favor of seeing. So we really want to make sure that the holistic approach was added into their support. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Page. Abby Peters, Faculty Senate Chair, Nevada State College. I want to thank President Patterson. This is by far the best example of shared governance on our campus this year. Starting with the coordination of the timeline, there was a lot of faculty concern initially about how quickly this would be brought to the board. And so I really want to thank President Patterson, his entire team, in coordination of the timeline, the involvement of the faculty. We had several faculty with great interest in what the change would look like, in particular expertise, especially with minority populations, with education and things like that. We had, through the task force, really, really solid faculty involvement and administrative faculty who would be impacted in the admissions process. So just a really nice communication win for our campus, and we've been looking for lots of those, and we've had several. And then also, I'm just looking forward to working with the Provost Office, with Provost Shields, in the implementation process, and faculty will continue to be involved in what exactly those additional holistic pieces of the policy look like. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Geddes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious how you picked ACT of 20 and SAT of 1020.
Thank you for the question. It's not a precise calculation. We don't overly rely on test scores. So we thought it appropriate to pick a test score that's somewhat below the university level, but you can see it's not comparable to test scores that are utilized in some of the other peers that are much lower than that. So we actually picked a fairly high test score. I think that's, open to discussion what we should look at there, but we don't rely heavily on the alternative test score. The GPA is a better measure of the success of a student in our data than test scores.
And I'm just curious, I've seen some where it's just kind of like a level where if you can go down to a 2.0, if you got a 30 ACT or a 1400 on your SAT, and there could be a sliding scale on that.
We could adopt a sliding scale possibility. We decided not to do that, but that is one option that we could consider. The reason we decided to just go with a high test score and not work with a mix of GPA was, again, because we don't overly rely on the test scores. We actually picked a relatively high test score compared to the GPA.
And then as far as the 5 to 15%, how did you derive that?
Absolutely. So originally, we have a policy that's an alternative admission policy of up to 15%. So that's already embedded in our current policy, is that we can actually take students below a 2.0 of up to 15%. So we kind of stuck with the 15%, but the reason that kind of works is that 15% as a ceiling is about the same percentage of students below a 2.5 that were are admitted at the college. So it technically wouldn't impact our admission at all if we enrolled 15%. The 5% is based on a floor, and it roughly corresponds to one cohort of students. So based on the last data that we have. So it corresponds in the fall of 2017, there would have been about 90 students as a whole under 2.5, and a third of that would have been about 30 students. So a cohort size is a nice way to think about it, because if we think about admitting a cohort of that, there are different programs we could design around a cohort model like that, so it actually is kind of intentional.
And then my last is, I think you'd be working with Vice Chancellor Abba on developing the policy and all the criteria there, and I'd like to see a lot of specifics in what you're using as far as those criteria that you can measure students on and bring them in. And if you could kind of define that cohort size in there versus the percentage of how many students you think it is, or that would be helpful for me as well.
Okay, we'll look at that. And again, it's trying to calibrate an admissions policy that will be over time. So we're not coming back again.
It wouldn't be an absolute number. I just want to see what it looks like in a class size. And then actually, if you could go back, and I know the numbers are changing greatly, but not just the class of 2017, but how it would have affected different classes with that total. Thank you.
Regent Trachak.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Thank you. So, Bart, just to make sure that I understand, if we had 50 seats and 100 students apply, then we let the 100 students in, or do we only let the top 50 students in? How do we handle that?
So it's a great question. So let's start. Generally, the admissions policy will just work that if you're at a 2.5 and above, you're going to be admitted, similar to the way the 2.0 is operating now. Then for students that apply below a 2.5, then we'll be looking at the whole of their application and more dialoguing with them directly to try to identify what percentage of those students that first of all, we have capacity for and that we think are really committed to getting a four-year degree and are willing to engage in the program success pieces that will help them be successful.
So if I understand that anybody who meets the minimal criteria, let's say 2.0 today, and they apply, then they're admitted, even if we don't have a seat for them.
Not exactly. So in general, that's true, but in some very limited programs, we're probably going to look at trying to limit even the students above a 2.5. So pre-nursing is a good example of that. So in the nursing population, we get a lot of students that come in pre-nursing. Frankly, we have a lot of students even below a 2.5 that come in designated with a pre-nursing type of degree that tracks into the nursing program. Of the students that enter below a 2.5, pretty close to zero get into our nursing program because you have to have about a 3.5 college at the end of your two-year prerequisites in order to get in. So it's pretty close to zero that get in. Now, when you get to students that are coming from a high school GPA of, say, a 2.5 to 2.75 or 2.5 to 3, a few get in, but not very many. So yeah, there could be more selectivity in very specific degree programs which have high limited entry programs.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that this shouldn't be just a discussion with Nevada State. I think it should be a joint discussion with CSN because I understand that there's some coordination between the two, and if possible, I'd like to hear what President Zaragoza has to say about this and share his thoughts with us.
So we're very supportive of the overall model. We think that the integration there, where we can actually collaborate with Nevada State College in the advising front end becomes important, especially if we go into a model where we've got co-funded positions or collaborative type functions. I think that's going to be very supportive going in. In terms of the growth component, it also helps us on our side for scheduling and for projecting what classes are needed based on what's coming out of Nevada State College. The other dimension, I think it's very encouraging for us to move our graduation needle, is if in fact we can develop some kind of a process where our students are accepted automatically into Nevada State College once they attain their associate's degree, much like they do in Florida. So again, it's a holistic kind of approach to dealing kind of with common student populations. And again, we've got not only common students, but we've got common services that we could coordinate for the benefit of the student.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, we are going to take a break for lunch, and then we're going to have a working lunch. When we come back, we'll let the board go first, go to item number 23. Okay, we are going to go to item number 23, Gateway Precinct Master Plan Update. President Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Page. Well, this is a turning point for the University of Nevada, Reno. Back in the entire year of 2014, we worked on the 10-year update of the master plan. We worked very closely with the City of Reno and the Regional Transportation Commission to design a plan which would move the campus south toward downtown and midtown to make this a true university town. Part of that master plan called for development of the blocks south of 9th Street that you see here on the map. If you want to be oriented on the map, on the left side of your map is Virginia Street, which is the main north-south route through the city. Next, and then you see it, the next street over is Center Street, which is typically coming from the south as your entry into the campus. And then Lake Street, which is just a truncated 1 block long street, which is truncated at I-80. So I want to thank the Board of Regents, the UNR Foundation, our donors, and our real estate office for all of the effort put into facilitating the acquisition of these properties and clearing these properties so that we can move ahead with the development of the properties for academic buildings. What you see before you today then is no more preparation. This is about a development plan for the initial phases of developing this gateway area, which is part of the 2014 master plan. We come forward with 7 resolutions, but I think in working with the chair, we can handle these with 1 summary and 1 motion if you wish, and then plenty of time, not plenty of time, but there's time for questions, put it that way. The first is to request your approval of amending the master plan that you approved in March of 2015, which had a very sketchy development of the gateway property. And based on that gateway property, we went to donors, we worked with real estate, we worked with the regents to start accelerating the acquisition of properties in this area. So now we have worked with an architect, and they came up with this design of our first 3 buildings that we intend to build there. A College of Business building, which will bring the College of Business to the edge of campus and make it more interactive with the community. A Life Sciences building, which we've explained before is necessary because our current biology and agriculture buildings, which were built in 1950s, cannot, according to an architectural consultant, cannot be renovated for modern laboratories. And then a parking garage, and if there's one thing a campus needs, it's more parking, particularly in the southern part of the campus, and particularly if these buildings get populated anytime soon. So that's the first part. The second part is, and the next slide, if there is another slide there, sort of, it's in your material though, it shows the roughly how these block buildings would be situated on the new master plan, I can guarantee you we're not going to have these ugly blocks. They will all all the architects will be instructed to create a campus campus atmosphere with building designs that meet the architectural standards of the rest of the campus, which will maintain a very beautiful campus. So that's roughly how the buildings would be situated. And I would point out for those of particular interest that the historic tree right there at Center and 9th has always been identified for preservation so that we can, it honors our veterans of many wars. The second part is the next slide then, and that would be to, okay, it's actually on the clicker. Okay, thank you. The next part is to ask the Regent's permission for the university to go to the City Council of Reno to request abandonment of this 1 block long alley between Center Street and Lake Street. We own all of the properties on both sides of that alley, and therefore it's a pretty standard process to go to the city and request abandonment of an alley. Alleys are necessary for public services and utilities, but since we own all the properties, we would like to have the entire palette with which the designers can build the next buildings. The third part is that'll be all the slides, I think. The third part is to request something that's pretty standard procedure. As we are building new buildings, what we ask is that we be allowed to use some of our own internal funds to do some of the pre-design work and the preparatory work to get some pre-design, to get cost estimates and the like, and fundraising materials built for new projects. And we would like to request up to an amount of $12 million that we could reimburse ourselves out of the financing plans that come along with each of the new buildings. And we will bring financing plans for each of our projects back to the board for approval. But if we can go ahead and prepare these documents for fundraising and the like prior, then once the financing plans are approved and the cash is in hand, we just request with this third part of this to be able to reimburse the university for the amount of the expenses into design and pre-design work. The fourth part, item number 4 in your briefing paper, is to ask your permission to spend the capital improvement fees based on registration fees that have already been accumulated. We've been saving some of our registration fee portions that are assigned to capital improvement for some time, knowing that we're going to move ahead with the use of these funds for buildings for academic purposes. The Regent's policy requires that if we want to spend more than $1.2 million of this fund on any particular project, that we come to the Board of Regents to ask permission to spend the money that we've already collected for the purposes of development of academic buildings and the whole gateway plan from those capital improvement fees. The next portion then is just to, as is normal policy, when we start a big project, we come to the Regents and ask for your permission to start a big project. And items 5 and 6 are to request the approval of the board to start these projects for a College of Business building, which you saw to go into the gateway area, and the parking garage to go in the gateway area. And in the briefing paper, we provide an estimated timeline for each of those projects. And then number 7 there is an item normally would go to business and finance, but the foundation has purchased for us the last remaining residential property in the Gateway area. And that resolution would be merely to accept the gift of the last remaining
President
residential
Johnson?
property related to this Gateway area into the ownership from the UNR Foundation Real Estate Fund to NSHE on behalf of the University of Nevada, Reno. And that's quite a rapid sketch of all 7 of these motions, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Going to go to Regent Trachak, then Vice Chair Geddes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve items 1 through 7 in these proposals from President Johnson.
Second.
Second from Vice Chair Geddes. Vice Chair Geddes?
Thank you. I was going to try and make the motion, but Rick beat me to it. I did have a question in just looking at it, and I know we've had discussions in the past, but as when you're working with the designers and the architects, and they are taking the design of the lower end of campus and extending it down into this Gateway precinct, it would also be good to recognize the heritage of the houses that are being moved or removed to build that, if that also could be incorporated into the architect's designs to kind of make that more even transition.
Certainly, and I commit to that. I would invite people to go into the William N. Pennington Student Achievement Center to see how we honored elements of Getchell Library. We took down Getchell Library in order to replace it with the Student Achievement Center. We saved some of the red granite and have a plaque there engraved in the granite recognizing the heritage of Getchell Library being in that same location. And we certainly will be working with our architects to identify ways to remember the history of the Gateway. I might just mention for historical purposes that we did get the permission from SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, to move ahead with our plans. They did require that we document all of the properties and get good photographs of all the properties. So we have a lot to go on in order to incorporate that in with our architects into these new buildings. Probably the academic building, maybe not the parking garage.
Regent Trachak, then Regent DiCarlo.
And I'm assuming we're saving the trees as we do this
We're
project?
saving the trees. Well, most of the trees.
Regent DiCarlo.
We've talked about the trees.
Thank you. Mine's more of a comment, and I'm born and raised in Reno. President Johnson knows that. We've talked a lot, and this part of town has been very special to me, and I have supported this project since the first time I saw it in the newspaper before I was even a regent. My grandparents, I said in the meeting before, lived at 734 Lake Street, and when I was going through those 410 pages of documents, I couldn't believe it. My grandparents were listed on the street, on Lake Street at 734. In 1934, there's my grandfather's name, Martino Giudice. And then in 1962, it was just my grandmother, Aurelia, because my grandfather had passed away a couple years before. And I have so many memories of the university and stuff. But I am really supportive. I'm glad you're going to keep the trees, and please try to save those trees along the street. They're just so beautiful. I know I went that way purposely this morning, and I know you've made a valiant effort to move and sell those houses, and I thank you for that. And I think you've had adequate time to do that. So I am really excited about this project and preserve that history. Thank you, President Johnson.
Thank you.
Okay. See nothing else, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Aye. Abstention, motion passes. You're welcome. We're going to go to item number 27, NSHE Business Centers Purchase and Shared Services, CFO Klinger. Are you multitasking again?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I was trying to sneak out the back, but you caught me before the item before you today is an update to a report that was presented to the board in November of 2018. And when I look at what was presented in November of 2018 in that report, the first thing I'll say is we still have a lot of work to do in this regard. And so, Mr. Chairman and Regents, what I would say is with the conclusion of the legislative session and the stabilization of my staff, you have my commitment to work on this moving forward. But what is before you today is just an update on the progress that has been made so far, specific to purchasing. And there's 3 items in here specific to the purchasing area. The first is a centralized supplier data management. So there's a single supplier database, and this replaces what used to be the institutions maintaining their own separate databases. The second item is an automated solicitation system, which again eliminates the need for paper-based manual systems at the institutions. And then the third area highlighted in the briefing paper is the collaborative contracting that has gone on thus far. And there's a specific example in there where there was an RFP done jointly with UNLV, Nevada State College, and CSN in regards to a multi-function device printers. So looking forward, next steps is for I think the business officers to convene and find opportunities within the business centers as well as other central service functions. And again, like I said in the beginning, I think the November 2018 staff report laid out a process I think that we as business officers need to revisit.
Thank you, CFO Klinger. Any questions? I just want to make an observation. I know we've had a couple conversations on this, and I know you're committed to this, and we appreciate that. But this was a marathon. We are right now just putting our sneakers on and tying them up. Okay? So a little bit, but kind of a long way to go, and we appreciate you taking the lead on it. Okay, with that, we are going to go to item number 31, which is the Investment Committee report. And I am going to recuse myself on this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the board has before it the minutes from our investment committee meeting. We had one action item and then one direction to staff. We made changes to the operating pool funds, short-term pool, intermediate-term pool, and long-term pool definitions to allow staff to come back to us with the needs that each of the institutions will have for these operating funds on an ongoing basis, so we don't have to continue to make ad hoc determinations of the distribution from those funds. And we also delegated the authority to the chief financial officer and the board chair to make whatever corrective action is necessary between meetings if we have to change our allocation amongst our assets, and also if we need to change or remove an asset manager. And so with that, I would ask for a motion to approve this agenda item.
Motion to approve from Regent Trachuk, second from Regent DiCarlo. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And one abstention. Going to go to item 32, Cultural Diversity Committee Chair Lieberman.
Okay, we met yesterday. Most of what we focused on was the recent close work between HSI Task Force, Edict, and the committee to work collectively together because we will be having less agendized meetings coming up. We will be having more public forums at the beginning or the night before each of the diversity summits. We will be promoting those diversity summits more widely, and we had a report on last year's Northern Diversity Summit. Beyond that, I will let you read the minutes, and I will call for a motion to approve.
Motion second from Regent Trachak. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 33, Academic Research and Student Affairs. Chair McAdoo.
Thank you, Chair Page. So I would also let you know that all of us have these before us, and I know that you've read them because we come prepared. So we had 3 information items given to us. They were enlightening information items. We also had 2 eliminated programs and 2 deactivated programs that we approved. But very exciting, we approved 3 new degrees: an Associate of Applied Science in Manufacturing and Machining Technology at GBC, a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Graphic Design at UNR, and a Doctor of Musical Arts at UNR. And I think that's great because we're meeting student needs with that. We made some approvals for some revisions to board policy, and we also approved board policy for the Nevada Foster Care Program that we as the Regents approved a while back. And so I ask for a motion.
Motion from Regent McAdoo, second Vice Chair Geddes. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. We are going to go to item number 34, Business, Finance, and Facilities Committee. Before I go to Vice Chair DiCarlo, I'm going to go to Chair Hayes.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I called in the middle of the meeting. As it turned out to be about a 12-minute meeting. I thought I was only a couple minutes late. And however, I was in error at which agenda item we were on, and I voted in the affirmative on an item that I intended to abstain on. So I would like to, it advises Chief Counsel Dean Gould. I'm sorry, there's a bad echo. At the advice of Dean Gould, I will be abstaining on the vote on this report. I was not the deciding vote. It was a unanimously passed agenda item, so it did not have a material effect on the vote, and I will be abstaining. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
Regent Hayes, I just want to clarify, is it your intention to abstain on the whole thing or just pull out that item and vote on it separately?
We can pull item 6 and vote on it separately, and I'll abstain on that.
Okay, so I would ask, it's item 6, I believe, which is the property down by the medical center, correct?
Yeah, that's the interlocal
So if we could,
agreement.
the interlocal, so if we could pull that out, ask the committee, or ask the board to vote on everything, so Regent Hayes, you can vote on the rest, and then do that one separately, please.
Vice Chair DiCarlo.
Okay. Can I go now? Now I can go? Okay, thank you very much. And Regent Carter, is there anything you have to say?
I do have my disclosure. In accordance with Nevada Commission on Ethics Opinion number 19-016A, as previously mentioned at this meeting, actually yesterday, I am again disclosing that I have a pre-existing relationship with UNLV arising out of my involvement in UNLV's Gaming Innovation course and my continuing contractual relationship with UNLV, under which I may be required to pay royalties to UNLV on a casino game that I developed. As this agenda item will not affect my significant pecuniary interests associated with UNLV's Gaming Innovation course and its subject contracts and associated policy changes, contract interpretation, collection matters, or litigation issues, and in accordance with NRS Chapter 281A, I will be voting on this agenda item.
Thank you, Regent Carter. And our group BFF met yesterday. We had no public comment. We had 4 information items. First was the 2018-2019 third quarter fiscal exceptions was presented, and then the third quarter budget transfers was presented, and there was nothing greater than $500,000. The purchase of real property down in Las Vegas was withdrawn. UNLV had a unsolicited offer to purchase a building at 4700 South Maryland. And those are the information items. Our action items, we approved the consent items, and which included the naming of a building at GBC, and we approved the minutes, and that's all the business that we can vote on with Regent Hayes. So I move for approval of what I just said and acceptance of this partial report.
Okay, so your motion for approval from Regent DeCarlo, second from Regent DeBrava. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, now we'll go to item 6, which Regent Hayes has recused himself from voting on, and this was the second amendment to the interlocal medical office lease with the University of UNLV. And we approved that, so I move for approval of the committee recommendation.
So we have a motion for approval from Regent DeCarlo, second from Amy. All in favor?
Mr. Gould, should I make a statement?
No, I think you've already made it, and so we pulled it out.
I didn't make a statement about what my abstention was based upon.
Sure, go ahead.
I will be abstaining on this item as I own commercial land in the medical district. I have no direct financial interest in UNLV or the land that they are leasing. But in order to avoid an appearance of impropriety or any conflict, if the advice of counsel, I will be abstaining.
Okay, thank you for that. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the one abstention? Motion passes. We're going to go to item number 35, Audit Compliance Title IX Committee. Chair Carter.
So we had an update from the internal Chief Auditor Joe Sunbury and one from Christy Galicia. We also had a presentation on Title IX, which probably is going to lead to us making some changes to our Title IX policy. We approved the minutes from the Audit and Compliance Committee, a couple audit follow-up reports. We also approved the internal audit report on the Thomas and Mack Center, UNLV. I would need to recuse myself from items 2B and 3, so if you can approve everything except 2B and 3.
Okay, so we have a motion for approval from Regent Lieberman, second from Regent DeCarlo. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay, motion passes.
So now you have to do 2B and C.
And then we would need a motion for 2B and C, or 2B and 3.
Okay, motion from Regent DeBrava, thank you. Second from Regent Perkins. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention?
And I abstain.
Okay. We're going to move to item number 36, Health Sciences Committee, Chair DeBrava.
Thank you, Chair Page. Health Sciences System Committee met, and you have that report in front of you. We had all informational items, and then it was just approval of the minutes. First, we had an update about the UNLV School of Medicine by Dean Atkinson. She mentioned that they've now accepted their third class of 60 students, and they are awaiting accreditation update from the LCME in June of 2019, later this month. Also, Dr. Michael Gardner gave us an update of the UNLV School of Medicine practice plan. At that time, Regent Trachok requested a cash flow summary, and we'll get that later on forwarded to everybody. I went on record to express the importance of UNLV and UMC coming together to form a beneficial relationship and a master affiliation agreement. Dean Atkinson gave us an update about that affiliation agreement. Dean Schwenk then gave us an update at UNR School of Medicine. And we received also a presentation about the UNR Medical School Rural Pipeline Program to help students from the rural area to either eventually apply and enroll at the UNR School of Medicine or the Physician Assistant Studies Program at UNR. We then had an update about, or I should say a presentation and update about the UNLV School of Dental Medicine Faculty Dental Practice Plan, and that was given to us by Dr. Marcia Dittmeyer. We will have more information about that rural practice plan, hopefully at the next Health Science Committee meeting in September. And the only action item, like I had mentioned, board action is requested to approve the following recommendation for approval of the Health Sciences Systems Committee, the minutes of February 28th, 2019, meeting of the Health Sciences Systems Committee. I move approval, Mr. Chairman. That's the end of my
Motion
report.
from Regent DeBrava, second from Regent DiCarlo. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 37 has been pulled. We are going to go to 38, employment contract, President Joyce M. Helens, GBC, Chancellor Riley. Okay, we will come back to 38.
Could I just move for approval of it?
You could?
I do.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second? Second from
Second.
Regent McAdoo. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. We're going to go to item number 39, one-year extension, contract President Bart J. Patterson, NSC.
Move for approval.
Okay, motion from
Who moved, please?
Regent Chaychuk, second by Vice Chair Geddes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. We're going to go to item number 40, one-year contract extension, President Mark A. Johnson, UNR.
Move for approval.
Chair, Regent Chaychuk, second by
McAdoo.
Regent McAdoo. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we're going to go to item number 42.
Before we get to that, I have one
Give him
thing,
around.
personal privilege.
Sure, absolutely.
I would like to thank you as the chair for your second term. This is, it's tough work. You have a full-time job, and being chair is another full-time job. And with your 3 daughters, that's a third full-time job. I don't know how you do it, but we all appreciate very much everything that you've done for the system and for the state. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Kevin?
And we want to do,
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate
I was just going to say
President
the 3
Helen. All right.
presidents, so congratulations, President Helens, Johnson, and Patterson, so. Okay, we're going to go to item number 42, any new business? Seeing none, close that. We're going to go to public comment in Elko.
No public comment from Elko.
Las Vegas?
No public comment in Las Vegas.
Okay, Reno? Okay, and seeing none in Reno, we'll close public comment. Before we adjourn, want to thank the President's office here at UNR. Thanks for sponsoring us here. Aubrey, Joe Crowley, Student Union, Chuck, Christopher James, all the student workers, Blue and Silver Catering, Kyle, Christina, Cindy, Police Services, Todd Rudnick, UNR Knowledge Center, Mark and Michelle, SES, Denny, CC, Ed, Tim, and the awesome board staff as always. So with that, this meeting is adjourned at 11:58.